Mitchell. And what number are you dialing in at?
I just dialed the number that I was given.
Okay. I think
Yeah,
you're...
you just put me on, said for me to wait, like a couple minutes ago. You just said hold on and wait.
That was Valerie.
Oh.
Just a moment, Mr. Chair. She's just pushed the button. It'll take 1 moment. We are now live.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 16th. I think it's important to acknowledge we are having this meeting in the territory of the Coast Salish people and acknowledge that fact. I'd like to also just make quick mention of the fact that we have, this is obviously a virtual meeting. We have some guests that will be joining us and that they will be given direction at the beginning of each of their opportunities to speak. I would also like to remind everyone to please keep your microphones muted. And should you wish to speak, do so on the direction of the chair, or if you wish to raise a point of order. If a point of order is raised, I'd like to ask everyone to stop speaking. We have a number of items to get through today, a lot of important business to be done. And so with that, I just also remind staff to keep muted and your mic off to save on bandwidth so that when you're called upon, please join us and unmute your mic. With that, we have an agenda that has been published in advance, and is there an appetite amongst the committee members to move the agenda as published? I don't believe there are any changes to the agenda as published. Is there, Ms. Harrison?
There is none.
So is there a mover for the agenda as presented? Moved by Director Yanni Donardo, seconded by Alternate Director Haim. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. We have minutes that were published of our meeting of September 2nd. Any errors or omissions that anyone noted? Could we have a motion to adopt those minutes as circulated? Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Alternate Director Haim. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Ms. Harrison, do we have any business arising from those minutes?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. And we will now go to item number 4 on the agenda, which is a public input period. And as noted in the, this is, I'm going to read this out before you start, Ms. Harrison. The purpose of the public input is to provide an opportunity to comment on agenda items before the committee and before we consider the item. It's provides the public with an opportunity to provide input in a timely fashion, and the public input period cannot be matters that are subject to a public hearing. And I would also note that we encourage people to provide that input for our consideration, but if we were in a live meeting and a person was at the microphone speaking, we ask people to be respectful of the people assembled before them and to I'll leave it at that. So with that, Ms. Harrison, do you have items of public input for the committee to consider before we start into our agenda today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one submission for public input and one for question period to date.
Before you go into that, I will take the public input and just remind everyone that does have questions for later that it's please send your submissions to legislative services, all one word, at cbrd.bc.ca, and I will try to remember to mention that again during the meeting. Ms. Harrison, please proceed with the public input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. It reads as a question and not public input period. So it has to do with delegates to a public hearing. Hasn't been held yet. Would you like me to read it or save it for public or for
I
question
think
period?
if it's a question, then it's a question, and we'll consider it at the end after we've considered the item. Obviously, yeah.
It
Yeah,
reads
thank
as
you.
a question, so okay. So I have none.
Okay, then shall we proceed? We are now at item number 5. And I think I see Guy Dauncey there, and Pamela Walker has made application to discuss the proposed multi-use trail in the Cedar Yellow Point area. I welcome you to the to our virtual meeting. I am sure that staff have explained the 10-minute timeline for your presentation, and I understand you also have a. Do you have a PowerPoint presentation for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We do. And if I click share, I believe that we can go straight to it. And if I do, are you all seeing this okay?
We are.
Good. So my name's Guy Dauncey. I'm president of the Yellow Point Ecological Society. I'm here with Pamela Walker, who's the put in so much work to have this thing. We in the Yellow Point Ecological Society operate jointly in Area H of the CVRD and Area A of the RDN. So our Yellow Point Trail requires work with both regional jurisdicts. We want to see a Yellow Point Trail around our region. Our request is that the CVRD set up a joint management. We need a joint management committee with Ministry of Transport, RDN and CVRD to plan the project and to find funds for the needed feasibility study to define the trail. Our vision is a separated multi-use trail which will support the provisional government's vision for active transportation, help us create a safe, healthy, sustainable community in the Yellow Point and Cedar area where many people find the roads dangerous to walk or bike on because of dangerous drivers, and to become part of a connected system of trails in BC. And on the right, you'll see a reference to the strategic plan of the CVRD that recognizes this kind of need. Our proposed trail is about 30 kilometers. It's a circular route around Yellow Point and Cedar with connectors to the Nanaimo Airport, bus stops, the park and ride on the highway, and the Dew Point Ferry. It'll also provide many local connections to parks, farms, markets, schools, churches, community centers, businesses. It basically tucks off everything that's happening in the area. And it could connect to a whole bunch of other trails that are either already existing or under development, and sort of enable us to be part of a wider network of trails so that many more people can ride and cycle and walk around the region. What does the trail look like? In most areas, there's a 20-meter right-of-way permitting a separated multi-purpose trail. In other areas, we might simply need a widened shoulder. To determine which, a feasibility study is needed. And Muckle-Haney, the consultants who have worked on similar trails, have offered a provisional budget quote for such a study. So what have we done so far? We've run this yellow bike campaign, which Ross and Pam dreamed up this idea of putting 20 painted yellow bikes around the neighborhood without explaining what they were. And my goodness, it's worked really well. Everyone locally, from the Crowan Gate to people you meet in the parks, are saying, what are the yellow bikes all about? And it's really got a great discussion. And in addition, we held a public meeting on Zoom for our members and supporters. We've been very active on social media. We've had the cover article in Take 5 magazine, which everyone reads around here. We talked to many local people. In response to this, there's the magazine for Take 5, the cover story, right, with our painted yellow bikes. We've had over 1,600 hits on the website, on the page on our website about the trail in just 4 weeks. On Facebook, we've had over 100 likes. And when we analyze the comments on Facebook, over 90% of people are either supporting the trail or they say they could support it provided there's no tax increase or no expropriation of private land or a few things like that. And some people have said, can we extend it to our road? We want it down Barnes and Holden Corso. We want it here. We want it there. We've had offers of help. So someone saying, you can put it on my land if you need to. Offers of equipment, offers of people's skills to make it happen. We've had letters of support from Paul Manley, from Doug Routley, from Colin Haim, from the Ladysmith Chamber of Commerce, from the Nanaimo Airport, which included an offer to use their land, from the BC Cycling Coalition, and from local businesses. The top reasons, I don't expect you to read all this, the top reasons people gave us: safety for their children and themselves, to be able to live an active non-car lifestyle, getting out, walking and cycling around the area, and the better community connections. And it's for walking, it's for cycling, it's for horses, it's for walking dogs, it's for access to schools. It's all these things. It's generally, whenever I'll meet someone. Just the other day, I was down at Cedar by the Sea, and someone said, I heard a random stranger say, "What are all these bikes about?" And I said, "Well, I can explain that." She said, "I'm so glad you're doing that. How can we support you? Is there a petition or something?" One woman on Facebook said, "In the Nanaimo, my kids could safely use their bikes. Now we've moved to the Cedar area, the roads are not safe. We've lost 2 pets. I saw an elderly man driven off his bike and nearly killed, and my neighbor needs to trailer her horses just down the road to ride in Hema Park because the roads are not safe." So when it comes to funding, there is a concern not to raise taxes. We need initially a feasibility study, which McElhaney has said will cost up to $40,000. If the feasibility shows that a trail is possible, we'll need then a preliminary engineering study, a detailed engineering study, and the funds for the actual trail construction. And the cost estimates seem to range from $300,000 to $900,000 per kilometre. Our information comes from transportation consultants like McElhaney, the BC Cyclone Coalition, and from other trail organisers. When it comes to possible funding sources, in addition to existing RDN and CVRD budgets, we're hoping could combine, and the possibility of using the federal gas tax, all these grant aid programs have deadlines coming up relatively soon. And there's actually a lot of money on the table for this kind of initiative. Partly because in response to COVID, which is where air pollution is a known accelerator of the spread of the pandemic, and a healthy immune system requires healthy walking and cycling. So there's a lot of support for this kind of thing. And we have the backup documents on all of these funds. So as next steps, we presented to the RDN board yesterday. We got a very positive response. A notice of motion was proposed by Keith Wilson, who's the Area A director, that the RDN name one person to join the Joint Management Committee and that the RDN offer its full support for the project. This will be voted on at the next RDN board meeting on October 27th. We're asking that CVRD support us to join. We're asking CVRD support us in a joint management committee with RDN and MOTI to engage formally with MOTI and help us find the funds for the feasibility study. And that's basically it. So we're inviting questions. I will find a way to stop sharing. How do I do that? My goodness. And click on the name.
It's 5 minutes instead of 10.
I don't know how to stop sharing. There's no button.
This is share. It says on here.
You're sharing.
There we go. Now we can't hear you, Guy.
Okay, you can hear me now.
We can hear you now. Do you have anything further to add before I go to directors for questions?
Do you want to add anything?
Oh, well, just one point of clarification with the feasibility study. We thought that it might be somewhere between 25 and 40,000, but the quote that McElhaney has given us with our projected trail was 24,000 and plus GST, etc. So not the 40 that we thought.
And I'd add, we don't know the best method to form a joint management committee. I mean, this is in your hands to work out, I think, between ourselves and yourselves and the RDN. We know it's happened before, that the Trail of the Okanagans was jointly developed by the Regional District of Central Okanagan and the Regional District of Okanagan-Silcomomean. So there's a precedent for a joint committee to do this kind of thing. But we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you. So I had Director Wilson, and I thought I saw Director Acton, and just for our delegation, understand that we don't create positive motions out of delegation presentations. We could have a referral to staff for further information, that sort of thing. So with that, Director Wilson, questions to the delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Guy. That's a great presentation. And first of all, thank you for the brevity and the clarity of it all. It was really very good. I'm in full support of this, and I'll, if I have to, then I can make a make a motion to the staff that they look into forming some sort of form of committee, which I would be happy to be part of. Thank you.
Any questions for the Director Acton? You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's not so much of a question. I just wanted to say to Mr. Dunsey, thank you for all the community work that you do locally in your community, but also for the whole region. And I love your guerrilla marketing with the bikes. That was extremely creative. And, I'm sure if you work with your area director, you're going to be able to solve this issue of creating a trail there. And, you have all our support, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alternate Director Haim.
Thank you. More of statements than questions. First off, I did express my personal support as an individual with regards to this project. It's a very ambitious project overall, possibly done in stages, but that's yet to be decided. The ideas of the connection between the communities, the participation and cooperation of the RDN and the CVRD. So there's a lot of good community pluses related to that. The initial ask that they have there revolves around participation in a management committee to work through the feasibility study and then hopefully go from there to actual implementation. With respect to what Director Wilson mentioned, basically the plan is for me to do a director's report to the board to request authorization to participate in this management committee. The initial idea is that, for example, on the RDN side, it would likely be Director Wilson for Area H, and then, or Area A, and then the representative for Area H to be a participation in that. So that'll be coming forward at a later board meeting. I do want to thank both Pam and Guy for the efforts that both themselves and their organization has put in. The yellow bikes, in terms of the conversations that it created with very subtle inferences in that regard, was something that really set the community talking in that regard. So I'd like to see it move forward, and as I said, there'll be a director's report coming to a future board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just gonna suggest that, and we don't normally do this, but considering the implication, and we didn't have access to the material in advance, but I'm just thinking out loud and wondering if there might be a reason, if you can deliver it in such a brief and concise fashion, that you might need to come back to a future meeting, because given the crossover into another regional district, that we may have to have resolutions from the board to make this happen. We're all obviously, alternate Director Haim has already taken steps to move in that direction, but I think our board as a whole, who would have to vote to appoint someone, could benefit from seeing some of this information as well. So I'll leave it at that. I think alternate Director Haim has a course of action planned out, and I'll go to Director Smith to close.
Can I just make a point with that, Mr. Chair? I have spoken to Brian Farquhar about this, and he says it has been done before, even in this region with the Great Trail. So yep. That precedent has been set, and he's happy to work with it again.
And agreed, and obviously it's just that small little point of a cross-jurisdictional thing that is the purview of our board and not this committee. So fair enough, and we'll do what we can to expedite this process through. Director Smith, question for the delegation.
Thank you very much. I'm an avid cyclist, so I can't wait for the trail. I just wish we had some sort of way of getting from Saltaire to Cedar and that area in Yellow Point without having to ride on the road. I definitely look forward to even a connection between as we move through the Cowichan Valley Trail extensions and get up to your way to have that additional I think it brings the tourism into the area. It supports smaller businesses because on a bicycle, you definitely stop a lot more to eat and a lot more to enjoy what's around you. And I thank you for your presentation today. It was really beneficial for the communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming forward and bringing this information. Any closing comments before we move on?
Could I just make one closing comment, Chair? Just another, bringing tourism to the community. It's very interesting that the airport has said that we could use some of their land. They have 550 acres and using that for a path, because they find that people from Calgary bring their bicycles on the planes and then bicycle around. So they would love to go and visit Saltaire as well. So.
And briefly, in response to Director Smith, it's possible that the vision we've had for the trail needs widening. So I can picture a trail linking Ladysmith around through Oyster Bay, round by Brenton Page Road and up into Cedar, which isn't in our plan at the moment. So when the committee's struck, I think we should consider all these wider options.
And seeing no other hands, I thank you very much for bringing this presentation forward. It's a great information. We got air claps from everyone for your presentation, and I'm sure that alternate Director Haim will be in contact with you should the need arise for you to come by and see us again. So thank you very much for that. We appreciate you attending today.
We'll press the red button and leave you to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
You had another, somebody sent you something.
Excellent. Ms. Harrison, I don't see any correspondence or information items, are there?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we go to reports, and R1 is from Development Services Division. It's an accessory dwelling unit. Oh, yes, it's all coming flooding back to me now. Who will be the staff person taking that one? Mr. Limshoe, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me for 1 sec here. Okay, item R1 relates to application number RZ20G01. The purpose of the application is to rezone the property located at 11224 Chapman Road from R2 to R2A for the purpose of allowing for an accessory dwelling unit. This particular application was considered and reviewed by at the September 2nd EAC meeting. It was then subsequently referred to the September 9th board meeting. The board resolution was to refer the application back to the EAC for further discussion. I'd just like to note that the staff report presented at the September 2nd meeting has not been changed, and staff is here to answer any questions that the committee may have with respect to the application.
There's everybody again. I see everybody keeps moving around on the screen. Director Acton.
I have a question since I don't see anyone's hands up. So this was actually denied at the last meeting. And what's unfortunate is that this applicant, when you look, so, you know, when I look at applications and there's, in this case, like 10 attachments, these applicants have gone through a lot of work and they've spent a lot of money and time getting here. Is there, and then we have the argument that it goes against the OCP and that soon we will be having a harmonized OCP in place. And so, you know, in some ways it makes sense to wait if it's something that's going to happen in the future, possibly anyway, if we're moving that way, and to avoid these one-offs and to avoid going against the OCP. Does staff not, is there, or is Mr. Limshoe, is there not a way to be a little more proactive in this, in the application process to inform the applicant that, you know what, this can be really time consuming, very expensive, and it's unlikely that the committee will, because it appears as the committee does not want to go against the OCP often. And we've discussed that we don't we don't do rezonings for the property owner, or so that we zone the property to keep the emotion out of it and to stick with the OCP. So, and of course, it's not always black and white, but is there something we could do as a committee or as staff, bring items forward as a preliminary thing? Like, what do you think, so that applicants aren't spending so much time and money on an application? And I can see why this one would be quite devastating for this applicant to go through all this time.
I see Ms. Chirelf has activated her video, so I think we'll go to Ms. Chirelf for a general response to that question.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, so the procedure that staff follow with applicants is rooted in the Development Procedures Bylaw. If you recall, the board has given direction to staff to review the Procedures Bylaw and to look at procedures related to applications and when things get referred, et cetera. So staff intend to come forward soon with a report and recommendations to change those procedures, and I would certainly concur that we can come forward much sooner with preliminary reports prior to applicants getting too far down the road.
Follow up, Director Acton.
Thank you. I would like a follow up. And so if we get to the motion that I would like option, sorry. When we get to the portion of the recommendation, could we separate the motion of the partial refund? I'd like to be able to discuss that separately.
My understanding is we can do anything we like with the resolution.
Well, so that's my request just to the committee. Could we separate those two so that we could discuss the motion when we're ready to call a motion?
Well, at this point, we don't even have a resolution on the floor. We're having general discussion and questions to staff.
Thank you.
Who knows what a future resolution is going to look like on this file? I have a speakers list of Director Salmon and Director Smith and Director Kuhn. Director Salmon, please proceed. Questions to staff.
Thank you. Yes, question for staff. So I'm just basically, this looks like the same application, yet I'm curious. The recommendation seems to have changed. Now it's to deny, whereas back September 2nd, it was to go to first and second reading and public hearing. So provide any comments on that?
Mr. Linshu.
The report that staff prepared for September 2nd, the recommendation from staff was to move the application forward for first and second reading. However, through discussion at the committee level, the committee's recommendation was to go with the option of denying the application. And so that was the recommendation presented to the board.
Do you require any further clarification? Follow up, Director Salmon.
Well, it's just, I would have thought staff's recommendation would be the professional one, and the committee would, of course, have their own, but I'm interested that it changed just based on the committee with no other substantial professional considerations being brought forward.
I will go to Ms. Chirelf in a second, but just for clarification purposes, we were provided with options in the staff report, and the director for the area moved the resolution that was supported by the committee at the time. That's the resolution that's printed in this agenda that's been referred back to us from the board. Ms. Chirelf, further clarification, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The staff recommendation hasn't changed. So the staff recommendation is what's in the staff report. You were dealing with the recommendation of the committee that was referred back from the board.
Correct.
Hold on. I just have to say what the staff recommendation September 2nd was to move forward.
That's correct.
And the staff recommendation today is to deny.
The staff recommendation continues to be to move forward. It's the committee's the previous resolution to the board that's being debated.
Okay, well, maybe in future it says recommendation right on the agenda there to deny, so maybe the wording should be changed.
I'm not sure that this is the actual recommendation that this committee put forward in an approved vote that went to the board. The full staff report was included, and the staff's professional recommendation that wasn't supported at the previous EASC meeting could be moved again in place of this, or we can go to the director and consider the director's wishes on this. But I think that all proper procedures as to how this got here in this form have been followed. I have Director Smith next.
Yes, to staff, the Area G OCP does not support accessory dwellings. The Area G OCP supports secondary suites that provide independent living for family, affordable housing, and housing for those with special needs. Is that correct for the OCP for the Area G?
That is correct. That is correct.
Does that conclude your questions, Director Smith? Thank you. Director Kuhn.
Yes, this is a somewhat unusual application. The OCP stipulates that no secondary dwelling be allowed. These people are not building a secondary dwelling. It's already there. Now, it's not being utilized as a residence or as a secondary dwelling as such, but it could be done. Now, yes, it goes against the strict lines of the OCP. I recognize that fully. My trouble with this is I often hear the argument it's precedent setting. I am very much against precedents, and I don't think if an exception is being made to an OCP that it is precedent setting. It was outlined in the staff report that this would only apply to this one property. So it wouldn't be precedent setting for other properties. We've had discussions about that in the past where we, let's say, decide to stick to the very strict rules of the OCP. Well, and I've argued once before, that's why we as a deciding body are there. If everything was black and white going to rules, nobody would need us, because staff would simply open their book and say, oh, no, this is not black, it's white. No, it doesn't apply. Bang, turn it down. But the world doesn't function that way. So now and then you get faced with an application that doesn't fit into the normal rules, and that's why we are needed. That's where we come in to say, okay, fine, we'll grant us this or we won't. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not the director for the area, so I'm reluctant to make a motion. But if somebody made a motion to go ahead according to staff recommendation, because I do believe the staff recommendation were right. Staff are doing an excellent job, and I think more often than not, when we question them, we come out looking kind of funny afterwards, because they were right after all. And I think with their recommendation, they were right. So anyway, I would support it anytime.
Thank you, Director Kuhn, Director Acton, myself, and Director Smith on the list. Director Nicholson after Director Smith. Go ahead, Director Acton.
I wasn't on there.
Well, you must have been waving at flies then. Myself next. Looking at this, we have a responsibility to come here with open mind and consider a great number of things and going into this. And, I think I would be, pretty heartless going into this and saying that some of the factors that have been presented from the owners don't impact me or don't impact any of us. And I've been to the meetings in Saltaire where the community has been quite firm in their desire to keep secondary dwelling units out of their community. Now, I think that that's a perfectly legitimate area for the community to comment in, and I think that Director Smith has made very clear that there's concerns of this opening the floodgates. Floodgates never really open around here because each individual OCP amendment has to go through Mr. Limshu and Mr. Ulf's department, and nothing really floods through there. It's the nature of local government. So I'm just looking at this and considering that these buildings have been on site for an awful long time. I've heard mention that they predate zoning. Well, I believe our zoning was in the mid 60s, not the early 70s. So, my mind is open to the contemplation that, despite Director Smith's assertions and the community's assertions, I think that the opportunity for the public to wade in on this in a public hearing seems to be a middle ground that I'm comfortable with. And I'm a little uncomfortable with moving straight to denial. We do respect the wishes of an area director, but we can put any resolution onto the floor and have that discussion and vote according to our will or to our conscience. And so that's sort of where I sit on this. So I'm gonna go to Director Nicholson before Smith, and I will go to Director Smith for a resolution. Director Nicholson, please.
Thank you. I'm just curious, I have a question for staff. Why the recommendation was not to also refer to the APC?
Mr. Limshu.
I believe at the time that the report was being drafted, we were not referring applications to the APC, but given the resolution that the board put forward, I believe at the last meeting, that opportunity does exist. So the application could, if it's the committee's wish or the board's wish, could be forwarded to the APC for comment.
Does that conclude your questions, Director Nicholson? Thank you. Director Smith. Oh, hang on. I had Ms. Chirulf wade in, and I will go to Ms. Chirulf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say for the committee's benefit that there may be a distinction in this particular application from others that might come forward, in that the proposed occupant would be a family member, and the other interesting thing about the OCP is that there, as noted previously, there's a policy that supports affordable rental and special needs housing. And then the policy that that is requiring the OCP amendment is the policy in relation to servicing, to water servicing. So that's what's forcing the OCP amendment. In terms of precedent setting and concerns about what might happen in the future, there is the ability for the committee to consider the option of working with the applicant on a restrictive covenant that would limit the use of the dwelling to being occupied by a family member. So there are some provisions. There are also housing agreements. There are other kind of tools that we have that we can work with the applicant on that could address concerns about potential future use. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the committee.
I was next going to go to Director Smith for a resolution, but Director Acton has put up her hand. I'd still like to afford Director Smith the opportunity to make a resolution. Director Acton, further question, please.
So, am I not remembering this application properly? I thought there was a letter from the applicant saying they were not able to represent themselves, and I expected them to be here today. Are they not?
I believe they are actually online.
Should we hear from them first?
Point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I do have Valerie Irwin in the room as a participant. She's on a telephone. She has no video.
That helps the flow fairly substantially. So we do have the applicant there, so I will still afford Director Smith the opportunity to make a resolution, but just not at this time. I would like to get to a point of concluding questions to staff so that we can bring the applicant forward to comment. Director Smith, do you have a question for staff, or were you going to make a resolution?
I was going to make a resolution at this time. Thank you.
Could you hold that, and I will come back to you for that. If there's no further questions of staff, have we got the applicants online now? Ms. Harrison, have they joined us?
They should be on the line. Let me just double check, make sure that she's still there. She appears to be there. Valerie, can you hear us? Valerie? One moment, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. She just actually dropped off, so I assume that she's trying to dial back in again.
I think it would be appropriate to wait. Given there's no further questions for staff, I will go to the applicant next.
Hello.
Hello, Valerie. Can you hear? This is Chair Morrison. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I was trying to connect through the video system, but it wasn't allowing me in.
This is Teresa Mitchell on the line.
Hi. Hi, Teresa.
Are these both applicants?
Hello. So this is
Valerie, are you on the line? Valerie Irwin, is that you? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Valerie, can you hear me? This is Chair Morrison.
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. We don't have video of you, but I think we have audio. Can I have a thumbs up if everyone else can hear the applicant? Okay, we got thumbs up. Everybody can hear the applicant. Valerie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, so just to give you some clarification as to how the process will move forward from here, we have staff, and staff have just answered questions of the committee. You now have an opportunity to present information that you would like to that may be supplemental to the application or further thoughts. You can do that. I will then afford the committee members the opportunity to pose questions to you, which you will hopefully be able to answer. At the conclusion of that, there will be a resolution put to the floor. At that point, your participation is excluded, and we will be in debate of the resolution, whatever it is that's put to the floor. So at this point, you now have the opportunity to share what you would like in regards to your comments as to the application. So please proceed.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to add necessarily to the key points that were read out in my letter. Thank you for taking that into consideration. I did follow along with the last meeting, and I just felt that those points were really important. Namely, I think it's already been brought up that the secondary home on the property is and has been consistently in use as a residence long term. It was built in the 50s. It's been used as a residence as long as I'm aware. And just speaking to my desire to have it legitimized by the rezoning is with a view to making some alterations to it, bringing it, updating it, making it a little bit more modern and more pleasing to the eye, more aesthetically pleasing, and also altering it inside for my daughter's use as she transitions into adulthood. She won't ever be independent. She has to have 24/7 care, as you know, by my letter that I submitted. And it's ideal if she can live close to me as her parent, her primary caregiver, but in a situation where she can have other caregivers and other family members help and assist and live with her. And the second home, the cottage, as we call it the cottage, but the second home allows a possibility for that. And I think if that weren't a possibility, if I can't renovate the cottage vis-a-vis a rezoning, then I think that it's very likely if Amy doesn't live with me, she would have to go into a facility, which might be a care home or a long-term care facility, which is pretty daunting. She's 16, so in 2 years, we've already started the transition process. She ages out of what's pediatric care. The ministry funding arm of that is the at-home program. I don't know. That's sort of essentially what I'm looking for, is just to legitimize the cottage. It's in use. It's my understanding it's legal and grandfathered the way it is now. Its use is residential use, and but it's old and it needs renovation.
Thank you, Valerie. I appreciate your comments and would hope that it's been heard by committee members, and would now turn to ask my colleagues if they have any questions for you specifically to what you've presented. And I've seen Director Salmon has put up his hand. So is there anyone else that would like to pose a question to the applicant? Go ahead, Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. Glad you were able to join us. Just wondered what your reaction, if you were listening a few minutes ago, Ms. Cheryl mentioned the possibility of a covenant that would restrict the use of the secondary suite to your daughter. Would you be open to that idea?
If it's the only way, but I have seen that these things are really hard to get rid of later, and so it may end up being, this is a little bit of a touchy topic, and I'll try to maintain my composure, but my daughter's condition is life-threatening. So if, she moved into the cottage and then at a later time she was no longer with us, then could I find another family member to live there? Potentially. I would be open to a restrictive covenant if it's the only way. But I'm not really, I don't think it's an ideal scenario. And my hope is that down the road, anyways, never mind. But I think that if that's the only way, it could be, the rezoning could be allowed, then I would be open to it. I would like to see what that restrictive covenant looked like and what kinds of opportunities there were to, yeah, but I would definitely be open to it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the applicant, but it's also generated another question for staff. So I guess my question, I understand that Saltaire in particular has been opposed to secondary dwellings. Are they actually opposed to the ones that exist and they're trying to fix the situation? Because here, you know, for example, in Shawnigan, we have cottages that have been built too close to the water or on the water. So, you know, the community would like to see those rectified. We don't actually have a mechanism to do that, but here we have an opportunity to fix something that's grandfathered. And is it something that is really frowned upon in the area? Like, are there other examples of this? Are we trying, and is the community collectively trying to get rid of them? Like, what's the flavor of your neighborhood?
So I think that was actually directed at staff, was it not?
Well, I guess it turned into that. That wasn't.
Well, you started.
That wasn't.
So.
That wasn't actually my staff question. So.
What
well,
did you want?
I guess is it something that people are trying to correct? Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Valerie.
Well, it's not my primary hat today, but I am a realtor, and I've worked in Saltaire and other areas, other surrounding areas for quite a few years, since about 2009. And it's my sense from the people I've talked to, clients and many people in my neighborhood, that I have not come across any kind of opposition to this, as long as things are done legally and within, you know, if they're done to be aesthetically pleasing and within setbacks and all of that. I've never come across that kind of opposition, but of course, the directors may have seen a different side of things, but it's not my understanding that people are opposed to that. My cottage, the cottage on my property does fit within all the setbacks. It has its own septic system. It actually has its own driveway off of Chapman Road. It even has its own address. I'm not sure where that dates back to. Has its own garbage pickup. I mean, it's really right autonomous in the way that it sits. So my sense is that I think my neighbors would be very happy if I fix it up and make it look better.
Right.
So
I guess can I have a follow-up for staff?
You can, but just
okay.
can I just set the table here to ensure that this is questions for the applicant, that I will you know, afford you the opportunity to pose the question to staff. But keep in mind, we have to debate a resolution at some point coming up soon. And I think a lot of the points that are being brought up right now are more suited to debate of a resolution when we get to it. So if we could proceed with questions through to the applicant, and in this case staff, then we can actually get to the business of a resolution. So follow up to staff.
Thank you. So essentially with this property, it's already in use as a cottage. We'd be taking away the use, the zoning, and I'm surprised that could happen when, if somebody's renovating, my understanding is at a certain point it becomes a requirement for a development permit, but I can't believe that it actually, you lose your zoning use when it's grandfathered. Could staff talk about that a little bit?
Could you please illuminate us on that situation?
I'll try my best. So through this application, we're actually not taking away any use. The zoning of today allows for a a suite. However, the suite has to be contained in the principal residence. In this particular case, there are two buildings on the property. There's the main house and then what the applicants refer to as the cottage. In this instance, the cottage was constructed back in 1950s, the main house in the mid 70s. And so, certainly the cottage predates the zoning bylaw and building permits. Over the years, we've had the property owners have made application for building permits to add to certain parts of the existing structures on the property. But I just want to make it clear that we're not taking away any rights of the property owner at this stage. Really and truly, what it does, the proposed zoning change would allow for more flexibility. So, rather than having the suite just simply contained in the principal residence, it allows for a detached suite, and so which enables the cottage to be legitimately used as an accessory dwelling.
Does that answer your question? So I'm just being cognizant of the time, and I'm trying to read the room here. I've got Director Wilson next. Do you have a question for the applicant? Director Wilson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do.
Proceed.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you tell me why you haven't applied for a residence within the present main building there? Is there not enough room? Is it not big enough for that kind of thing?
Do you mean a secondary suite?
Yes, I do. Sorry, that was bad wording on my part.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, the main house is, it just hasn't been desired or sensible to do so, and right now it's a part of it is unfinished. It's a partial basement. So there's a garage under the home, and then there are a couple bedrooms downstairs. It's not immediately easy to turn it into a separate residence per se. There's a laundry room and a couple of bedrooms. So it's not that easily done. The cottage / whatever secondary dwelling is already in use, and it's freestanding, and it's been used as a residence long term.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's answered the question.
Okay.
Do we have any? I saw Director Smith put up her hand. I thought it might have been in response to a question from a director, but are there any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I want to thank you, Valerie, for attending today, and you can probably. Is she able to stay on the line to listen to our discussion? She can't participate, but we'll now move on, and I am going to go to Director Smith, but I'm trying to read the room here and note that I think we have two fairly clear paths that we can go down, maybe 2.5, but there's a resolution before us that is the denial, and there is the possibility that the committee may want to recommend that the process move forward and that a public hearing happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Director Smith, hear what her resolution is, and we will, I think, go fairly quickly to a vote on it. And depending on the outcome of that vote, if it's not successful, we could proceed to another resolution. But I've promised Director Smith that I would afford her the opportunity to make a resolution on this application in her community. So with that, is everybody clear? Is that fair to proceed on that basis? Okay, let's go. Director Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I just want to ask staff for a little bit of clarification. Currently, that cottage can be lived in as is for a long period of time. There's nothing, it's non-conforming, so it can remain for a place to live. It just, if renovations are done, it needs to be brought up to the building code. Is that correct? and that it can be altered as a non-conforming with, as long as it stays within the footprint of the building?
Do you want to take that, Mr. Limshu?
Yes. So, given that the cottage has been there since the 1950s, it is non-conforming in the sense that of the location of the building. Certainly, it was originally a dwelling, and it's my understanding, talking to the applicant, that it has been used for residential purposes. Your question about renovation. It's my understanding that, given the age of the building, it does require renovations, and the extent of the renovations, I'm not 100% sure on, but it will trigger the need for building permits to be applied for in order to ensure that the structure meets code. There is legislation around non-conformance, and there is actually a limitation in terms of how much you can, how much renovation improvements you can make under the non-conforming criteria. And certainly, without knowing the details and the extent of renovations, it's hard for me to comment on further on that. Certainly have to work with the applicant to sit down and talk through that process.
But fortunately, Mr. Limshu, Mr. McDonald has just joined us, so he can probably finish your sentence for you. Mr. McDonald, can you enlighten us on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just follow up by Frank, because he's commented quite well. I also am unaware of how much is required. I can tell you that they are permitted to maintain the building as a legal non-conforming building, but they are not able to repair, and this sounds like this is what we're getting to. In a long non-conforming building, it will run its course, it will run its life, and then that would be the end of it. But I think what the applicant is trying to do is extend that life, and that's where I think you're going.
Director Smith, follow up.
I would think that the cost of that type of renovations to bring a building into building code might be something that could be spent on a secondary suite within the newer house. But one of the things I'd like to say is that as electoral area directors, we endorse the HOCP, MOCP process, and this is the direction this conversation needs to go for the Saltaire residents. We need to look at the whole picture of 200 parcels, a quarter of the land use within Saltaire, and that this then we would have an idea of what qualifies for a accessory dwelling. We would be looking at additional water, we'd be looking at usage, we'd be looking at additional septic systems, noise, traffic, additional businesses and properties with two houses. By law enforcement, you can put a covenant on saying it's only family, and 2 days later there is no family there. Then we put the onus on the neighbors to spy on neighbors, and then put a
Director Smith, order,
comes
please.
to bylaw enforcement. Yes, so I would like to make a recommendation.
Can I just ask that could you please make a recommendation?
I recommend that the file RZ20G01 be referred to the Area G APC for review and comment.
Seconded by Alternate Director Haim. Any discussion? It's a propriety of referral only, not on the merits of the file. Director Acton.
Doesn't Director Smith have that superpower to do this anyway without us even voting on it? Isn't it something that you are actually allowed to do? And we could have done that 25 minutes ago? No? That was my
question of
understanding.
The propriety of referral. There's a referral motion on the floor. I'm about to call the question on the propriety of referral. Ms. Chiralf, very limited, please. Do you want to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just wanted to say that yes, the director can absolutely make a referral to the APC. This item was referred directly back to the ASC from the board. That's why it's at the meeting today.
Director Smith, on the propriety of referral.
Yes, due to the changes that have occurred through the 9th of September meeting that does now allow our APCs and our commissions to meet, this is why I'm referring it at this time. Prior to that time, we were unable to refer our items to the APCs, and this is an opportunity for the APC to make a recommendation back to EASC. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? One opposed, the motion carries. I'm going to call for a 7-minute break and we'll reconvene at 2:45. Looks like we have quorum. Next item on the agenda is R2. Mr. Limshu, please proceed.
Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen with you. So item R2 relates to application number DVP 20C02. The subject property is PID 020971756, located off Cobble Hill Road. The purpose of the report is to consider an application to vary section 5.2.3 of the CVRD South Cowichan zoning bylaw number 3520/2012 to increase the maximum height of 2 separate fences on the southern portion of the site. So the fences that we're talking about are located on the southern portion. So there's fence A, fence B. Here's a picture of the actual fence and walls that have been constructed to date. The applicant has been regrading the site to accommodate a future development, a future industrial building on the property. So they proceeded to commence construction of the retaining wall, only to realize that they actually needed a building permit for that. Upon further discussion, it was also realized that a variance is required to not only accommodate the retaining walls that you see, but also the fence that will be located on top of each retaining wall. So if we look at retaining wall A, the cumulative height between the retaining wall and the chain link fence is 5 meters. That's a variance of 2.5 meters required, as the maximum height under the bylaw is 2.5 meters. Similarly, for wall B, the cumulative height will be approximately 6.5 meters, which is comprised of a 4.5 meter retaining wall and a 2 meter chain link fence on top of that, which represents a variance of 4 meters. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Well, Director Wilson, go ahead. Questions to staff?
No questions, but I'm not seeing anything else there, Mr. Chair. So I'm willing to move the recommendation.
Well, hang on. We've got the applicant in the room, do we not? Or
that is
present?
correct, Mr. Chair.
Yep. So let's ensure we have process here. I actually did have a question for the applicant. So if there's no further questions for staff, I would invite the applicant to join the meeting. Gordon Smith.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good.
Any questions for I know I've got a question, but I yield to other directors if they are so inclined. Mr. Smith, quick question for you. It looked like you had moved a lot of dirt around. Was it all contained within the property, or did you have to bring in any other fills to achieve the contours and the lakes for this property?
All the fill that is there is from the property. Initially, when I purchased, there was roughly that same height difference that went down in about a 1-to-1 grade between myself and my neighbor. What I've done is I've dug out the eastern side of the property, moved it forward, and turned that contour into something more vertical through the retaining wall.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions for the applicant? And does the applicant have anything further to add to the application at this point?
Thank you, not at this time.
Okay, just for your information, once the resolution is put to the floor, we can't consider any further input from you. I'll turn to Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this property well, and I know that it also includes a brand new Clement Centre at the back as well. I don't see any problem with this, and the applicant has been up front with everything that's gone on there. So I move that this development variance permit number DVP 20C02 PID 030-971-756 be issued.
Seconded by Director Kuhn. Any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Ms. Harrison, when will the products of this meeting be going to the board next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe it's October 14th.
That sounds about right. Okay, thank you. Next item, R3, and that we turn to Mr. Limshu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R3 relates to application number DP20B07. The subject properties are located at 1847 and 1855 Radway Road. The maps that you see in front of you give you an indication as to the location of the subject properties.
Hello?
I gather we've got the applicant. Hang on, for Mr. Limshu. I gather the applicant has joined the meeting.
That is correct.
So just hang on, Mr. Limshu, for a moment. So for the applicant's benefit, where the staff is presenting the report to us, we will go to questions to staff. When that section is completed, we'll ask you if you have any additional comments to add. There may be questions from the committee members to you. And when that section is completed, we will go to a recommendation. And once a motion is on the floor, your participation will have ended at that point. So with that, I'm going back to Mr. Limshu to present the presentation. Are you able to hear us and hear the discussion? This is to the applicant. Do we still have the applicant with us? Ms. Harrison.
Hello?
This is
Hello?
Chair Morrison. Can you hear me?
This is Teresa Mitchell, Radway Road.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So did you hear what the explanation that I just gave is to process?
I just heard a tail end of something about Frank Limshu giving the report. I didn't know if it's my turn, or this is my property, my development permit, or not. I didn't hear any of that.
So you've been brought in. I'll repeat the process again so you can understand and participate fully. Your process or your application is before the committee and is being shared on the screen as we speak. Staff will make the presentation. The directors will pose questions to staff and hear those answered. When that section is completed, you will be given an opportunity to add any additional comments that you may have in addition to this or any newer information. Then the directors may pose questions to you based on your comments. When that segment is completed, we will take a resolution from the committee that will be on the floor. At that point, your participation will end and we will go into debate of the resolution.
Okay, so
you hear all that?
I just want to tell you there were erroneous statements
Well,
made.
yeah, fair enough. You can
Okay.
you can make those points when you have the floor. At this point, our professional staff are providing us with the report, and if there's any corrections or changes you want to make, you can make that when I invite you to do so. Okay?
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Limshu. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of the report is to present a development permit application for a 3-lot subdivision pursuant to Shawnigan Village Development Permit Area DPA of CVRD South Cowichan OCP Bylaw 3510, Schedule A, Appendix B, Shawnigan Village Plan. The Shawnigan Village Development Permit Area requires a development permit prior to undertaking development, which includes subdivision under the Local Government Act. Basically, the applicant wishes to split the 2 existing parcels. So on the subdivision plan that you see before you, the existing configuration is something like this. So that's parcel 1. Parcel 2 is this rectangle. With the reconfiguration of the 2 existing lots, the applicant wishes to create 1 additional parcel. In order to do this, each parcel must be connected to a community water system as defined within the zoning bylaw 985/1886. So generally, a development permit would be approved if it complies with the guidelines. But in this instance, the issue is not related to the development guidelines themselves, but rather to the fact that the proposed use and density is not permitted with the absence of a community water system. So the way our bylaw defines a community water system, it reads as community water system being a system of waterworks which serves 50 residential unit equivalents or more, and which is owned, operated, and maintained by an improvement district under the Water Act or Local Government Act, the Cowichan Valley Regional District, the municipality incorporated under the Local Government Act, Listec Holdings, or the Burnham Utility Company. So while so as you can see to the left, the table basically outlines the minimum parcel size that are permitted for subdivision purposes. The catch is that the parcels have to be serviced by a community water system. And as I've just read out, we have a definition for community water system. Unfortunately, the applicants indicated that they're not able to connect to the community water system as defined within our zoning bylaw, as it is cost prohibitive to extend the water service to the parcels. Based on this, staff is of the opinion that the issuance of development permit for subdivision would be contrary to the zoning bylaw in terms of the required minimum parcel size and the connection to a community water system as defined in the Area B zoning bylaw. And it is for this reason that staff is recommending denial of the development permit at this point in time. So in summary, the applicant is not able to connect the parcels to the community water system as defined in our zoning bylaw. And that requirement dictates what the minimum parcel size should be. Under the Local Government Act, we cannot vary either use or density when considering applications. With that, I will open it up for questions from the committee.
If you could lower your presentation, thank you very much. And are there questions for staff from committee members? Director Acton.
I think it was answered right when I lost audio. So essentially, this applicant could connect to the village Lidstack Waterworks. Am I correct?
That's correct. The issue is the fact that the water system is a good distance away, and so the cost of extending the Lidstack system to service these lots are cost prohibitive for the applicant.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, Ms. Mitchell, sorry, Director Nicholson, hang on, Ms. Mitchell. Director Nicholson, question for staff.
Thank you. I just want to be clear on the rationale for the rule that 0.2 hectares requires connection with the community water system.
Mr. Limshu, would you like to provide that rationale to the committee?
So it's the question how we came up with the 0.2 hectares as a minimum parcel size? Just for clarification.
Director Nicholson.
Why do small lots have to be connected to a community water system?
Mr. Limshu.
Generally speaking, when you're considering any type of subdivision, one has to consider sort of 4 basic criteria: water, sewer, drainage, and access. The smaller the parcel size, the more difficult it becomes to accommodate those services. So typically, on parcels that are larger in acreage, as an example, 2.5 acres is typically the minimum parcel size where you can have an on-site well and an on-site septic system. As you decrease the parcel sizes, it becomes extremely difficult to meet the water and sewer requirements. So at the time that the bylaw was created, I believe the logic was that if the properties are connected to a community water system, then the issue around water supply has been addressed by connecting to that community system, thus leaving the remainder of the site open to providing for on-site septic and drainage and access.
Mr. Dennison, I'd love to have you weigh in on this one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Frank's quite correct. Fundamentally, we need to keep sewer and water separate. In the past of human civilization, for a long, long time, they didn't do a good job of that, and very bad things happened. So you really, really have to keep them separate, and small lots just can't manage that properly at all, and the risk to human health is very substantial if things go wrong. So there's, and you know, the rules from Island Health have been established, and a lot of the rules you see here are very similar to what you see all over the world. You know, there's sort of rules of thumb that say, you know, you can only manage so much density with on-site servicing of well and septic before bad things are going to happen. You really have to avoid that.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for staff? Director Acton, question for staff.
Thank you. I guess, you know, I think for staff, it was pretty obvious that this applicant had a request that was going to be likely recommended that it be denied. My question is, or my hope is that you conveyed that to them right from the start.
As indicated in the staff report, we met with the applicant a number of times, and we conveyed that to them right from the very beginning of the discussion, indicating to them what our definition of a community water system is and the issues around supporting the proposed subdivision in the absence of them being able to connect to meeting the requirements for a community water system. That information, that message was conveyed to the applicant, to their consultant a number of times. The applicant indicated that, as you can see, they wish to proceed with the development permit, which is their right. And so we are processing that development permit application.
Are there any further questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm trying to find where the applicant has gone on our screen.
I'm just on audio.
Okay.
I don't have any video.
Would you please proceed? And if you've there you are. Ms. Mitchell, please proceed with any comments or additions to what you've heard so far.
Okay, so I just first of all want to say that some erroneous statements have been made in the staff report by the CVRD, and in fairness, I would like to clear those up right away. The statement that numerous accessory buildings were applied for and permitted on this property in the last 20 years, primarily pursuant to the 1998 BC building code, some have had all inspections and some have not, is untrue and defamatory in respect to my properties. So my house at 1855 Radway Road had its final inspection in April of 2004. My accessory building, which is located on the new lot I am proposing, had its final inspection September 13th, 2004, and my house at 1847 Radway had its final inspection in 1991. There are no other buildings on my properties. I have owned my property since 1988. I received sole ownership in 2017. My accessory building is a suite over a double garage, approximately 623 square feet, and has all legal permits from the CVRD for an accessory building, including water and sewer, September 13th, 2004. I've been trying to legalize my accessory building, which is a lovely Mediterranean-style building, with stucco siding and a clay tile roof, moved on site from Saanich over a brand newly built double garage in 2004 since 2018. I originally began with a boundary adjustment in 2018, which would put my accessory building, Granny Suite, over an acre with the 1847 house, and therefore I could upgrade to a legal small suite. The CVRD told me they would not allow this in spite of giving approval for water and sewer in my building permit because I was not on community water. I then went for a legal subdivision of my suite on its own lot as a way to legalize my suite, and this is where I am now. Since community water was required, I got a permit to operate a water supply system from Vancouver Island Health Authority. I also received all septic approval with reserve on all 3 lots. My permit to operate a water supply system from Island Health is CTRL BK5QAT. I was also required for my permit to get a water license from the province of BC. My license is from the Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, and is reference number 100007, receipt number R717905. My license is for 3 hookups, 1855, 1847, and the accessory building. I'm listed on the license as a water provider. My goal is to legalize my beautiful suite and correct the current unattractive dogleg shape of the 1855 property. This odd shape affects both of the properties, and I want to change that. I'm happy to either subdivide through a 3-lot subdivision or do a boundary adjustment between 1855 and 1847, creating a legal small granny suite on the 1847 property, which would then be over 1 acre. And just to top it off, I would just like to say that CVRD's definition of community water doesn't define community water, it defines the system. Community is a social group of any size whose members reside in a specific locality and shared government, etc. So that's community. My water is community water. As far as I'm concerned, I am on a community water system. And the only thing I'm fighting is a definition, not a zoning bylaw.
Does that conclude your remarks?
I think so.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant from committee members? I see. Director Nicholson?
So I'm a little bit confused now because your second option that you are would be open to having happen. Does that mean it would just be fixing the boundaries of the two lots? So there would be two lots?
Yes, it would be two lots, but I would increase the size of the lot that has the main house and the accessory building to over an acre, which means I would legally be allowed to have a small suite on that property, but it's the same issue. The CVRD will not allow me to do that, to legalize my small suite, which, like I say, it's a building that was moved here. It was a brand new garage, but I won't be allowed to legalize that because I'm not on community water. Even though I think I'm on community water, I have a permit from Vancouver Island Health to operate a water supply system. I have a water license from the Ministry of Lands and Forests. And so as far as I'm concerned, I have and am on a water system. But the CVRD won't recognize that. It's basically I'm cornered into not being able to utilize my R3 zoning designation because of their definition of community water. Island Health doesn't define community water as 50 hookups or more. They define it as 2 or more. And so does the Drinking Water Protection Act defines it as 2 or more. So the CVRD's definition isn't in line with the main authorities concerning how, water is dealt with.
Director Nicholson, follow up. You're muted.
I understand the community water system issue, but this is a question now to staff. I'm not really clear on what is preventing this other option where we'd have two lots, so we don't have neither lot is large enough for subdivision, or how does that work?
Unfortunately, at this point in time, I cannot provide an adequate answer to Director Nicholson's question without doing some more research. Our focus has been on the application presented that is in front of us, which is a 3-lot subdivision, right?
Final follow-up, Director Nicholson.
Well, I'm just wondering if maybe we should refer this back, because it's clear that we can't move forward with the because of the water situation.
So I've got 2 staff and a director want to jump in here. So before we go to a referral, we don't even have a resolution on the floor yet. And I'm going to go to Mr. Limshu and then Ms. Dixon and then Director Acton. Mr. Limshu.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Dixon, as she is the planner on this file.
Thank you, Frank. If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, just to clear up some of the questions from Director Nicholson and the applicant with respect to a proposed boundary adjustment, we did explore that option, and it was found that it would not work in terms of legalizing the suite, because the suite would have to be over 1 hectare if not connected to the community water system, which is 2.47 acres. The 2 properties combined do not equal that area. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. So I'll go to Director Acton next, and I implore you, this is questions for the applicant? We don't have a resolution on the floor. I believe most of what we're talking about has been contained within the staff report. The applicant has provided with some clarification. Director Acton, do you have a question for the applicant?
Yes, thank you. So either of your proposals, does it allow you to have higher density than what is already there?
I'm allowed in the zoning to have a house and a small suite on 1 acre, but it's the same issue as the subdivision. They want to then define community water as joining a water system. So even though they allowed me to have a legal accessory building on water and sewer in 2004, they now won't acknowledge that, and in order to upgrade to a dwelling, I must join a community water system, which at the time, 2 years ago when I started this, was over $250,000, and I understand it's a lot more now. Plus, I'd be required to put $9,000 hookups on each property where I subdividing, and then also pay the $80+ a month for water, and have water from Shawnigan Lake, which has, of course, 100,000 tons of toxic waste in the watershed, is chlorinated on 4 levels, and chlorination causes cancer, and also has all the fecal coliform of numerous types of animals, and also septic and motorboats. So one thing I have decided through this process is I won't join the lid stack system because my water's excellent. In fact, I have no bacteria in it. I don't have to treat it because whenever I have my samples taken in, there's 0 bacteria in my water. So honestly, I wouldn't join the lid stack system.
Thank you. Director Acton, follow up, please, to the application.
Yes. So, Ms. Mitchell, I sympathize with your situation, and I respectfully disagree with you on your definition of community water. I think it's
Director Acton, could you please pose a question to the applicant? We shouldn't be debating with the applicant.
I'm not debating in. I'd like to, when you're ready to move a recommendation, I'll do that.
I just want to complete the questions to the applicant at this point. Are there any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, Ms. Mitchell, thank you very much for your attendance today. And I will now turn to the director for the area. What is your pleasure?
Well, unfortunately, I have to agree with staff's recommendation. Well, not unfortunately. I think it's really important that we stand firm on connecting our water systems and our sewer systems when that's available. It in the end hurts the whole community if we don't participate, and that is something in the future when the water line does come down, that property will have the opportunity to connect or not connect.
Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Are there any questions or debate on this issue? The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that development permit DP20B07 be denied for the reasons outlined in the staff report dated October 28th, 2020, and more particularly because the non-compliance with the minimum parcel size established in zoning bylaw 985 for parcels not connected to a community water system as defined in the bylaw, and the ability of local governments to vary land use and density under the Local Government Act by way of development permit. Everyone's clear on the question? We'll now call it. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion is unanimous. That recommendation will go to the board on October 14th. Thank you very much, everyone. Next item is R4 Chapman Road. Mr. Tippett, or is it Mr. Limshu? Who's taking this one?
Mr. Tippett will be presenting or speaking to the application, and I'll be running the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait for Frank to share. I have a couple of slides. which will be there in a moment. Here we go. Okay. So the committee's seen this already, I believe a couple of times. This is the property in the Cobble Hill area where there's an application to permit a distillery on a rural residential parcel. You can see the parcel's location on the general map on the left-hand side of the screen. Specific location at Chapman and Boyles Road. It's approximately double the size of neighboring properties in the area. The property has an existing metal-clad accessory building on it, within which the owners are proposing to establish a distillery business. So, Frank, if you could hit the next slide for me. I'm jumping right to the recommendation, but before we get into this, I'll just update the committee on happenings since the last time you've seen this. So the last committee direction was to proceed to develop a draft covenant with engaging the applicant as well in that process, and we got that through our legal advisors. I've got some wording which is attached as one of the attachments on my report. It's passed muster with both our legal counsel, and we got positive feedback from the applicants on it as well. And the other thing is we made some fine-tuning adjustments to the zoning, which includes, you will note, adding brewery as a permitted use, because it's kind of there's sort of a complementary aspect to it, and I think the applicant who is listening in could probably contribute more technical information on between distillery and brewery, and there's some advantage in allowing both of them explicitly. So anyway, that is entrained in this recommendation that you see before you. We're now recommending that the bylaw, which got only one reading at the board previously, be considered be forwarded to the board in its amended fashion for consideration second reading, and that the draft covenant, which is an attachment to this report, be endorsed. Now that we can do public hearings, we would also recommend a public hearing be scheduled with the three directors named there as delegates. The fourth element of this recommendation is that the existing referrals that were sent out be accepted by the committee. And a final condition is a recommendation that a province of British Columbia water license authorizing the necessary groundwater extraction for the non-domestic use, in other words, the brewery / distillery, be a precondition of adoption of the amendment should it get past the public hearing stage. So that's the staff recommendation. If you have any questions for me, I'll try to answer them. And I know Kent, I think, is also perhaps wanting to say some words too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And as that's lowered for the applicant's benefit, just a clarification as to our process, we will have directors pose questions to staff. When that's completed, I'll invite you to come forward and add any additional comments that you may have. Then give the directors opportunity to pose questions to you. And when we've completed that, we will go to a resolution of some sort, and your participation will be concluded at that point. So with that, colleagues, do you have any questions for either Mr. Tippett or Mr. Limshu on this file? I see no hands being raised. So I think this has been before us before. I think it's very clear. I would go to the applicants and ask if you have anything you'd like to add that hasn't been covered by the staff so far.
Well, we just want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. We're really excited. We're looking forward to a public hearing. We are looking forward to hearing our neighbors' thoughts and opinions. We've been in constant contact with them, and they seem like they're on board, and we're really excited to see what else they have to say.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing that to us. Do any of my colleagues, any of the directors have any questions for the applicants at this time? Looks like we have no questions for you. Get off easy today.
So prepared.
With that, thank you very much for attending. I will be going to the director for the area and asking for a resolution. Director Wilson, please. What is your pleasure?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see no problems with this. It's nice to hear from Dorian and Aisling again. It's been a little while since I last spoke to them. Would you like me to read this out, or is it okay if I just move it to be accepted as is there?
Well, it's going to be a lot of reading, and I think everybody has it before them. Is anybody requiring it to be read out? I'm seeing lots of nodding that it doesn't. So moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion on this matter? Seeing none. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That too is a unanimous resolution that will go forward to the board on the 14th of October, I believe. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. How's everybody doing? I think it's about time for another break, but we gotta, yeah, okay. So everybody take 7 minutes and reconvene at 3:35, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Mr. McDonald, you get to join us a couple of times today. We have a report before us from the Inspection and Enforcement Division. I believe we're on R5. Does that make sense? Yes. Mr. McDonald, do you have any remarks or comments? I actually do have a comment that's reflective of something in your report, but do you have anything you'd like to provide to us?
Mr. Chair, no, I don't. It's for information only, and there's no presentation, and I'm just here for questions.
Excellent. I would yield to anyone else if they had a question of Mr. McDonald. I do have one. Seeing none, Mr. McDonald, I'm just looking at my my numbers for my electoral area as an overall, and boy, things change in a few months. Seems to me at the beginning of the year, I had some new single families, residences developed, and a fair bit of activity in the building inspection department, and now I'm in my familiar last place again. Grown accustomed to that, but I'm just wondering if you've seen any indication of a pent-up demand, because I happen to know there are no available building lots, or very few available building lots in my electoral area in general. And if there's not available building lots, then it's pretty hard to have new single-family dwelling building permit applications. So have you noticed any trends in that area? I think we've got some in stream, but have you noticed a decline in that area? I've got a 0 for this month, but any comment?
I have not a lot of comment, but no, there's, as you've mentioned, there's not a lot of development and a lot of empty lots. Things have certainly filled out Wall Street as an example, and Stinqua. So I think that's what you're seeing, is those filled out. There's no new developments in stream. So until somebody starts a new development, you may not see a whole lot coming up.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. I ask anyone else if they have any questions. Seeing none. Oh, actually, Director Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I don't see breakdowns between sort of the islands and Saltaire. I assume that most of the new single family dwellings is over on maybe Thetis or Ruxton. Is there a breakdown for those between the areas?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that information in front of me. They are considered all Area G, but if you would like that in the future, I could certainly provide that information.
Any further questions for Mr. McDonald? Seeing none, we'll proceed to the next item, R6, Community Heritage Register. Who will be taking that item? Mr. Tippett, welcome.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Well, this report was actually prepared by our summer student who's now back at the, I don't know which of you might have met Haley. She was working in the office for about 2.5 months. One of the tasks that we assigned to her was to deal with a request that we had very early this year, just before the pandemic hit, to asking that the Yubo Community Church be put on the CVRD's Heritage Register. And so we assigned that to our summer student, Haley, and she attended the site with Keith Batstone and wrote up the report that you see attached. It's a fairly straightforward report. Just recommends that the church be added to the register. In case you're wondering, the CVRD's Heritage Program at this time doesn't involve a regulatory aspect or taxation. It's more just a kind of recognition program of existing significant heritage buildings in the community. So that's the background to the report. And
Director Kuhn, what's your pleasure?
I move to the resolution.
Is there a seconder? Seconders all around. Any discussion? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Oh, Director Acton.
Well, I don't know. Maybe this is just to Mr. Tippett's point of it actually has no regulation or anything. I've come across this myself in our own community, not being able to preserve heritage buildings. It's unfortunate that we don't have a function, and I think it's something that we should be thinking about and looking forward to, so that we can protect some of our heritage and old buildings. So when I saw this come up, it was a little bit shocking because because of the challenges I've already gone through trying to save our first schoolhouse in Shawinigan Lake. So anyway, hopefully it does something more than just put it on a list, and we can.
Mr. Chair, is there a question coming up here?
Was that a point of order, Director Wilson?
Well, I thought you just loved listening to my voice.
Hang on, everybody. You had the floor. I don't believe the question was in order. You can proceed if you wish. You're done? Any further questions? Any debate? Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? No one opposed. The motion carries. R7. Mr. Limshu or Mr. Tippett? I think Mr. Tippett should take this one. No? Mr. Limshu?
Let me see what this item is, Mr. Chair. I wasn't expecting to take it, but I could possibly. Just a moment. Let me get my...
It's the wetland exclusion of Couverton, and it put into the general provisions by mistake.
Oh, well, yes. I guess I could just speak generally about that. I think it came up in consideration or in discussion at the previous meeting. Staff had brought forward a package of proposed amendments, and it was recognized during that process by the director, the chair in this case, that there had been some sort of drafting error in the bylaw. So this effectively would correct that error and make the clause regarding wetlands apply only to the lands that were subject to the public hearing, which is namely the Couverton lands near Honeymoon Bay. And the consideration of expanding that, the purview of this regulation to other lands can happen during the modernization project, which would be the appropriate time.
Any further questions for staff, or could I have a mover of the recommendation? Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Alternate Director Haim. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion carries. R8, Water Management Division, something that we discussed a little earlier, and I think this might, is it a fine? No, it's a Mr. Dennison question. Yeah, you know all about that stuff anyway. So Mr. Dennison, would you please lead us through this particular report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in all of our utility services that we charge by parcel tax, we have a requisition limit that limits the total amount of tax that may be charged under the parcel tax for the given service area. We are allowed to increase that by 2.5% every year, leading to, by 1% a year, leading to, 5% a year is the figure that we can only do up to every 5 years before we start again. So every 5 years for any of our utilities where we're now at that limit, we bring it forward to increase the limit by that 25% allowed. And so we've got that in place. And the reason we do that is that for areas that are gaining in services, then if there's more properties adding to that service area, you need to increase your requisition limit so that you can keep your parcel tax consistent. Otherwise, if you hit the limit, then you can't charge any more parcel tax, and then user fees have to go up if you're adding more properties to the service area. Most of our utilities do have service area additions from time to time. One thing as well, and then in some of our cases, we have other issues that we need to increase parcel tax. Maybe operational costs are going up, which they tend to do, or we have new requirements, or we have loan requirements, or we're looking forward to asset management, or all those kinds of things that need parcel tax. So we want to make sure that we have the requisition limit in place to support that if we need to do it. It does not, the requisition limit does not in any way impose any increases. It just enables them if that's the will of the board. So we always think it's wise to increase the limit when we're at that 5-year time period. So we have before you 4 of them that are recommended for the increases. Oh, one other matter too, Mr. Chairman, is that we've got a new wrinkle as suggested by our legislative folks upstairs, and that is we've now added the feature of also allowing an increase according to the property value tax rate increase. So we set a certain rate, and as properties increase in value, that would also increase the requisition limit as well at the same time. So that means that if you're adding properties to that service area and automatically increasing the total requisition, your requisition limit goes up. And so that makes that feature something we don't have to do every 5 years now. If we're adding properties, it will automatically happen. So that's a great innovation, and we're very pleased to see it. And we're recommending then that the requisition limits and this new feature be added to the bylaws for Satellite Park, Shawnigan Lake North, Saltaire, and Arbutus Mountain State Sewer.
Thank you, Mr. Dennison. I think we probably have questions for you on this. Director Kuhn, you were going to move the recommendation, weren't you?
Yeah, I was going to move, yes.
Okay, hold on to that. We got Director Smith first. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have some questions on Saltaire. On page 3, it indicates that the proposed new maximum is 720,000 or 836, and then behind that it says average. Can you advise me what the word average is there for?
Mr. Dennison.
Yeah, so hold on a sec.
He's looking for a finance person.
Actually, I'm not sure about that. That's the wording that our colleagues added in, and I believe, I'm not sure what that would refer to exactly. I'd have to find that out and get back to you on that. It's the legislative matter that they add into the bylaw, so I'm not sure what that refers to precisely.
Before we proceed, let's see if we have any of our legislative services or finance people that can assist with that. I see Ms. Harrison activating her mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Smith. I'm sorry, could you ask that question again? I think I missed the key element there.
Well, on page 3, it says the proposed new maximum is 720,000 or 836, and behind it, it says average. None of the others say the word average, and I'm asking for clarification on the word average.
Thank you, Director Smith. Through the chair to Director Smith, I believe this is part of the report that was written by staff, and what they're referring to is the average house assessed at $100,000. I believe that's what it is. So 836 is the cost per home, average assessment of 100,000, like for every 100,000, that's the average, right?
I saw Ms. Soldera activate and then disappear. I thought she might. There she is again. Ms. Soldera, can you assist us in this matter?
Sure. I don't know if there's a special reason that the word average was put in. Ms. Harrison is exactly correct. It is the amount that it would be. So if you were to divide the 720,000 by the number of parcels in the area, that is the amount that it would work out to. So there's not a change to the method of taxation. It will still be a parcel tax that will be applied equally to all the parcels. But the word average has no special meaning.
Director Smith?
Yes, so that word should be not there. Is that my understanding? Because we pay currently with parcel tax, and so none of the others are saying average. So is it just a misuse of word?
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Mr. Dennison, why don't you jump in? You seem...
What I suspect is the case is that that's the wording in the original bylaw, which was probably carried forward. And other bylaws just didn't happen to have it. We have that same sort of issue come up all the time with where our bylaws are different from place to place. For example, you may be interested to hear, Mr. Chairman, that in Missachi Lake, there is no requisition limit. Those are old as the hills, and they didn't have requisition limits in those days, so there's nothing in the bylaw on a requisition limit. And then others have other things, and it depends on the wording of the day or whatever the norms were, or even perhaps the staff involved particularly that put these sorts of things in. So I suspect that's the reason that average word is in there, because it was in the original bylaw.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest the path forward here. Hang on just a second, Director Smith. I'm going to suggest that we have 4 items that we could deal with individually and pass each one, and then we can go to the number 3. And I was just wondering if that word average was actually in the resolution. I don't see it in the resolution, so I guess... Does anybody else know? It's not in the resolution. So there we have the actual resolution will go to the board, doesn't contain the word. So I would ask the pleasure of the committee. We have a resolution here. Are there any further questions on this, or does somebody want to move the resolution? Director Smith?
Can we just pull number 3, because there is more discussion required here in regards to this. So maybe the others can move forward, and then we can go back to number 3.
It's the pleasure of the committee to move. Would someone like to move 1, 2, and 4, and then we will then go into full discussion on number 3. Somebody want to move 1, 2, and 4? Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any discussion or debate on those 1, 2, and 4? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on mathematics for Mr. Dennison, which I'm sure he can answer. Looking at the satellite park there, where it says tax rate of $1.167 per $1,000. If I'm got this correct, then the house worth $1 million is going to pay $1,167 a year. Is that correct?
Mr. Dennison.
This is the sets the requisition limit, not the parcel tax, right? So it does not, they will not pay any differently than anybody else. All the properties pay exactly the same amount. So it's not, this is just a method for calculating the requisition limit. It's not a method for deciding what the parcel tax is.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other hands in the air, we have a resolution to move 1, 2, and 4 forward. I will call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. Director Smith, further questions for staff on number 3?
Yes. The 230,000, is that not more than 25%? That's number 1 question.
I see Mr. Dennison looking for support on this. Mr. Dennison.
Sorry, I have my in-house expert, Louise, just to my right here. So when I'm looking there, I'm looking for some advice. Sorry, I've got a phone ringing as well. Okay, so yes, this is to support the loan that we were considering for Saltaire. And again, it's not the actual taxation rate; it's a requisition limit that would allow for that loan to be applied to the customers there if that all plays out as we expect it might.
Director Smith.
So if the loan is not required, the full 3.7 million, then the requisition amount doesn't need to be 720,000. It could be less. You're just putting this in place so it can go up to that amount?
That's correct. So again, Mr. Chairman, through you, the requisition limit only caps what we can charge through parcel tax. It doesn't set the rate at all. So there's no requirement to have any increases at all because of the requisition limit. It just enables, should we need all of that for what we're expecting for the loan authorization, if that should play out, to the full 3.7 million, then we would need that ability to go to that requisition limit. We're hoping, of course, that we get our grant and we won't need very much of that at all, or perhaps even nothing, as we considered alternatives. But we're thinking while we're doing these other bylaws, we may also do this now and get it in place. It'll go together to the, that way the inspector municipalities can have a consistent, picture of this. So here's the loan authorization bylaw, here's the requisition limit.
Director Smith.
So in 2012, the Saltaire residents through a CVRD petition to authorize an increase to the maximum annual taxation requisition limit of CVRD bylaw number 2178. It indicates in that petition that the bylaw, that the maximum amount of money that may be requisitioned is in support of the service will be increased from 190,000 to 490,000 for a period up to 15 years, which is a $300,000 increase. But that $300,000 increase is for 15 years. I don't see a sunset clause in this bylaw of 2178 to reflect that sunset of 15 years.
Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my understanding of the bylaw from 2012 is that it does not have a 15-year limit. There was a public consultation on that matter, but the bylaw itself doesn't have a 15-year limit as far as I understand. Are you showing me that it does? Perhaps it does.
That's what the people signed. That's the CVRD's petition that went out to the people, and my understanding is that 15 years is there and for that 300,000, and it needs to be put into a sunset clause.
I don't believe that actually is in the bylaw. Now, perhaps it ought to have been.
It should be, and we need to be looking at amending it at this time to make sure that that's reflected in this bylaw.
Sure, that could be amended. That would be a separate topic. If we were putting it into this one, it would have to be 20 years, but we'd have to know for sure when we're actually going to do the borrowing in order for it to be 20 years later, precisely. So that's a little bit, right now we've got a timeline and we have an order from Island Health, so we can guess at that. I mean, I guess we could put in that plus a year to be sure that we've got enough time. I don't mind. That's fine to put in.
This is for the 2012 petition CVRD taxpayers assent to increase the 300,000 for 15 years. And it's not reflected any place in any of the bylaws, and it needs to be reflected because in 15 years, which is now approximately 7 remaining years, that money will no longer be there. And it needs to be in the bylaw to reflect that. And we need to amend the bylaw with a sunset clause to ensure that most of us may not be here in 7 years, and a lot of the people that signed on to it in 2012. So I'm going to be asking for an amendment to the bylaw to ensure that that's reflected in there. And maybe legislative services can give me some direction on that.
So hang on, I'm going to go to Director Kuhn after a brief discussion with Ms. Harrison. Is what's before us in any way linked to the question that Director Smith raises? Because this is a requisition limit increase. What Director Smith is referring to is a petition to requisition a dollar amount, and doesn't necessarily pertain to this matter here. Now, I fully acknowledge that she may wish to have the bylaw amended to reflect maximums and reductions in requisition amounts in future years, but are they specifically linked from the 2012 to the matter that's before us? And I wouldn't want to put projects at risk by delay, but how would you recommend that we address those inconsistencies? Through to you, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the petition that went forward in 2012 was project specific, and it had to do with requisition a limit on an increase for paying back that particular project. The one before you today is related to a different loan authorization bylaw. And if the director for the area wishes to further amend bylaw number 2178, which is the establishment bylaw, to include a time limit for the requisition maximum requisition limit, I'm not sure that's something that I could answer. Probably finance could, because I don't know if you can set a time limit in that manner.
So I guess that leaves us with the question, and I'll go to you in a moment, Director Kuhn. Oh, look, we got 2 finance people popped up on the screen. So maybe we should try to get some direction from finance on that. Who wants to take this, Ms. Soldera or Ms. Weiner?
I can speak to establishment bylaws. As far as my recollection is, there are no end dates. That's because the directors have the ability in the future to reduce the requisition based on budgets that go on in the future. I've never seen one with an end date.
Thank you. Director Kuhn.
Yeah, I think this issue has nothing to do with the issue at hand that we're supposed to vote on. That's a whole different issue. And I think the director of AIG can sort that out afterwards with staff. That doesn't even have to come to this session here.
So we have an item here that I do believe it's an issue that Director Smith wants to address. I don't know whether it will cause any difficulties in the meantime or for budgeting for next year. It's somewhat separate, so I'll turn to Director Smith and ask her what her pleasure is.
I would like to recommend that bylaw 2178 be amended to reflect the sunset clause of the additional $300,000 for the 15 years that started in 2013, and that the end date is, the staff would have to sort out the end date, which is approximately 7 years from now.
So can I just, before anybody jumps up and seconds that, this is really bad practice to do this sort of thing on the fly. I'm going to recommend that this be referred to staff. I don't know if there's any time implications, but these are where mistakes get made, things get missed, and dates are wrong. So would somebody be interested in moving a referral to staff to have this corrected? Director Smith, you're moving that? Do we have a seconder? Director Nicholson, any discussion on the propriety of referral? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. Item R9. ISIP Program Rural and Northern Communities Grant. Who gets to take that one? Mr. Dennison, again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have another round of this grant program before us, and there's a new set of openings. The program Rural Northern Communities is intended for smaller projects for smaller communities. So it's not the place for, say, 43210 applications for, Shawnigan or Saltaire or larger sort of projects. There's not very much money available for them, so we picked or recommending to three that we think of are as being, pretty good chance and fit the intent of the program in terms of its size. Mr. Chairman, if you got a question.
I wasn't. I was just going to move the recommendation.
Oh. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to describe these projects or? Oh, can't hear.
So, Mr. Dennison finish. I'll go to Director Yanni DiNardo next, and I acknowledge that Director Smith put up her hand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first is to unite Maple Hills and Cobble Hill Sewer. Maple Hills is an aging system. We've already had a couple of shaft failures of the RBC system. That's going to need replacing soon. Also, this is in keeping with the NOVA report to consolidate systems, which it'll do, and also would enhance service capacity in the urban containment boundary for Area C. Second is an extension to the Honeymoon Bay system, extension and replacement of the main through the Sutton Creek, what used to be the Sutton Creek water system, which we took over and added to Honeymoon Bay. This would replace that water main and extend the system further to the west. So that would replace a fairly substantial problem for us. For that water main is quite old, and we've had a number of breaks there, and with leakages and various problems. It expands the service area to the west, which provides for a capacity for more customers, and also extends firefighting capacity out through that area as well. And in general, enhances the sustainability of the Honeymoon Bay water system with the additional customer base. And then third is, again, an integration of Kerry Village water and Carleton water systems in Area A. Kerry Village has, both systems have an issue with manganese, which we have in a number of systems that we have to deal with. That's a new standard in water. And Kerry Village has access to the sewer system, so it's able to discharge the material that you get in a filter when you're removing manganese. Carleton does not have that. There's nothing anywhere nearby at all. So in order to treat for manganese in Carleton, it'd be very difficult. You have to haul that material away for disposal, and it would make it very, very expensive. It's a small system, again, small customer base, and to try and address that would be very difficult. So we think in this case, if we can unite the two systems, Carleton's also a bit marginal in water at the peak times of the year. Not much, but a little bit. So that would address that problem, address the manganese problem, and also, again, is in keeping with the mandate to unite systems to enhance sustainability in the long term. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to move that recommendation. It's in our reports that we've already read. Thank you.
Director Nicholson first. We have that was seconded. Director Nicholson. No?
You're muted as well.
Director Smith.
It's great to see so many applications. With the ANOVA report, it seems like it was 2017 February that we were all listening to that report. I, as a general public person, and it seems really great to see a lot of these moving along in moving with this through this system. I just have a question. If you have grants applications in for portions of this, is there any of that happening and that it interacts with these grant applications? I'm just can't remember all the other grant applications that we have in right now. And I'm just wanting to make sure that we're staying safe.
Well, I'll go to Mr. Dennison, but I know his staff are pretty darn good about stacking and not getting into trouble with inappropriate grant matching possibilities. But go ahead, Mr. Dennison. Could you answer that question?
Thank you. Yes, no, there's no applications for any of these projects. We have indicated the Kerry Village and Carlton one for community works. I think we have that as a potential. We'd find out before considering that. We would wait till we get the grant in hand if we get the grant. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there's no conflicts now. We're not going to spend money unnecessarily for sure. You know, in general for our utilities, we are very, very careful on all those dollars, and we don't want to waste any at all because they all make a difference wherever we can use them.
Seeing no other questions, I will call a question. All those in favor? Any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion carries. Another water system one, R10. These are conservation plans, though. So, Mr. Dennison, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, these are water conservation plans. These are very, very similar. We follow a template to others that we brought through to the board in the past few years. We are required to have these for infrastructure grants. So we've got a batch here to make sure we've covered off our various grant applications, and I think there's one extra one in here. So we gradually will get all of them before you, but this particular batch are critical for these applications we have coming forward shortly.
Director Kuhn.
I move to recommendation.
Seconded by Director Wilson this time. Any questions on that list and the recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. That motion carries. And once again, I guess all these are going through to the October 14th meeting. Excellent. You might even, oh, you disappeared. R11, 2021 CWF projects list. Might have a little discussion of this. My screen went dead. Who's taking this one? Ms. Soldera. Oh yes, you're our CWF expert now, aren't you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my report, you will see in 2021, as we've been discussing throughout the whole CWF process, for 3.0 funding, we get our money in various installments throughout the 5-year life of the program. In 2021, we have more projects than available cash. And so the cash available for allocation in 2021, after projects that have already been approved, totals $1,379,936. On the list before you is projects totaling just over $2 million, $2,003,000 to be exact. So there's a funding difference of about $623,000. And so staff have prioritized a few of the projects looking at our asset management report and our upcoming infrastructure needs, and have included all of the suggested projects on the list for discussion by the directors. These projects include both projects that are from electoral area director specific funds, as well as those from the 30% funds, because we only get one lump from UBCM each year.
Sorry about that. I keep getting told to mute myself and I forget to turn it on. I have a speakers list. Directors Yanni, DiNardo, Acton, Salmon, and Smith. And Director Yanni DiNardo has given her the don't want to talk, so we'll go to Director Acton.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. First, a tiny comment. Area B has a large portion in there, some for infrastructure and some for water systems and some for park trail building. So, I'm happy to not take all of that. But my question would be for Mr. Dennison, could we postpone the Carlton and Lambourne one until either end of the year or in 2022, since you have applications for grants, et cetera, that would be stalling the project?
Mr. Dennison.
Yes, we could do that. That's one of the ones we don't want to have a conflict on. So now that the application's been approved by this committee and going forward to the board, we could shuffle that back a bit. It depends on the timeline. So it depends on the timeline for when we find out about the awards. We're hopeful. The last time they didn't take too long, is about 6 months. So we should find out, within not too long. If it's the same kind of timeline, we should find out by spring whether we're successful in that. And then we could still go ahead. We'd have the time to still go ahead with this project. But we certainly wouldn't spend any community works funds unless we were certain that we weren't getting the other award. So if they took longer, then there might be that problem, and we just until we heard on the award. So it could be pushed back if we needed to. That would be okay, I guess. But we'd like to have the possibility.
Well, in the past, can I go, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Director Acton.
I have worked with Mr. Dennison in the past, and they do tend to take a lot longer to get back to us than we hoped. I spoke to the director of Mill Bay before this meeting, and we agreed that the Mill Bay one had a bit of a stronger priority, connecting Shawnigan and Mill Bay together, and because that project is also started. The phase 3 for Railway Trail, the Railway Trail project has started, but the Mill Bay one is a tiny bit further along. So Area B would concede to that going ahead, but what I am proposing or asking is perhaps the water system projects could go either later in the year or into 2022, so that we would have the funds for the completion of the Railway Trail.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I can play ball. Let's we can do that.
So I guess I'll go to the speakers list, but does that mean we're going to need an updated list that will come forward as a recommendation to the board? Ms. Soldera.
I do think we would need an updated list, or actually, no, not necessarily. I would just like to confirm with Mr. Dennison, if I may, and with Director Acton. I'm pretty sure I heard Director Acton mention the Lambourne projects as well as Carlton, and my understanding was that Lambourne had a bit of urgency to it, and so I just wanted to double check if Mr. Dennison was also agreeing to put off the Lambourne project until 2022.
Sorry, I was thinking about the Carlton one. I wasn't thinking Lambourne, so that's my apology. Lambourne's pretty important.
I see. So where does that leave us? Were you talking Carlton? You talking Lambourne, or?
Originally, I was talking about both, but if Mr. Dennison feels that it's something that's on the emergency scale, that's fine. It does allow for perhaps some flexibility. I think it would mean that the phase 3 for the Railway Trail would still be a little bit uncertain, but there might be some room for finance to make it happen. And if that is the case, I would look to them.
Mr. Dennison.
Sorry, just for clarification on the Lambourne one, we had a failure quite recently, a pretty serious one in the works and the pipe works in the building, and it spread out all over the community, and it was a pretty nasty one. And we really, that infrastructure is on its last legs, and we could have the same thing happen any minute. So we really, that one, the Lambourne one is pretty important that way. The Carlton one can wait. It's not, the manganese issue, Island Health is not yet breathing down our necks on it, so we can put that off for a while.
Okay, so I'm just trying to keep it together here, and I think I'm starting to have low blood sugar or something, but we have a list of projects that were to be recommended. It looks like we're doing a little bit of innovating at this point. I still have a speakers list of directors, Salmon Smith and Yanni DiNardo, and Nicholson. But am I to understand that if we're going to be modifying, and Dr. Haim as well, if we're going to be modifying this, we're going to have it nailed down before the recommendation goes to the board as far as the final project list and dollar allocation and all of that. So Ms. Soldera is nodding in agreement that will have to happen. So everybody's taking really good notes and is clear on what we're attempting to do here. Somebody nod, Mr. Dennison, nod up and down. Yeah, okay, we're all good. So I'll go back to the list. I've got Director Salmon next. Hang on before you start. Salmon, Smith, Yanni DiNardo, Nicholson, and Haim. Anyone else want on? Okay, go ahead, Director Salmon.
Yeah, so thank you. So as Director Atkins said, we did sort out the big ones on the roadside path, or the rail trail and roadside path yesterday with Mr. Farquhar staff. So I guess just now that we have Mr. Dennis taking out Carlton 160 off the first list, that leaves 160 extra to go into the other ones on the second page there. So I don't know if I'll wade into that, but I am happy with the roadside path. We have had design works already started as we speak. I've written about this several times. Communities ready, Rotary standing by to help. So I'm glad about that.
Thank you, Director Salmon. And just so that it's clear to everyone moving forward, we're going to make our recommendations that staff go away, refine the list, and we'll all have it in advance of it going to the board. So everybody's clear on that? Good. Director Smith.
So I'm on R12, and it's Community Works Fund 3.0, asset management infrastructure investment projects. It's not our local area projects that we have for the funds allocated to us. So I'm confused why Director Acton and Director Blaze are speaking about trails, because there's no trails on this attachment A. This is only
R11.
We're on R11.
Oh, I apologize. I see. Oh, thank you. I apologize. I've moved forward, skipped.
I'd like to skip a few too, but yeah, let's try and stick to the agenda. And I'm feeling much the same as you at this point. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that Lambourne is not on any grant list, and it is critical. And I just wanted to make sure that people understood that. And I know that Mr. Dennison's already repeated it, so it can't be switched for something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I'd just like some clarification. So how does this happen? Do we put in how much will we require in the installments, or do they just arbitrarily send us a certain amount?
Ms. Soldera, can you please bring clarity to this, please?
Absolutely. So when UBCM announces the total funding for the 5 years, they actually do a breakdown on an annual basis. So UBCM gets a certain amount of money from the federal government every year that's then divided up to the local governments in accordance with a formula. So we know how much we are getting each year for the next 3 more years after this one.
Okay, so I'm a little bit concerned how this will, obviously I don't have any projects on this list, but I'm a little bit concerned how this might play out for the following year, because I am hoping, desperately hoping, that our staff can get the planning done for some roadside work in our electoral area E, but if there is no funding, if there is an inadequate amount of funding coming forward, what will be the process for us to get on that list?
So we'll go to Ms. Soldera, but I think that's precisely the point that she said about the annual contributions, that we will be looking at a list to approve those. But Ms. Soldera, please correct me if I'm wrong or fill us in.
So I do believe that in Area E, there is some CWF 2.0 funds that have already been allocated towards a trail, and those can be used at any time. We have that money in hand that's been allocated to projects, and it's just waiting for those projects to go in the budget. This is for new projects. Staff met with each electoral area director last year and actually went through asking directors if they had projects that they would like to put on the list, and working with staff to bring forward projects. So at that time, a listing of projects according to years that they were currently in the plan was put forward. Right now, the projects that I currently have knowledge of are for 2022, we have more money than projects at the moment. And so not all electoral area directors have chosen which projects they would like to complete within the 5 years, which is absolutely within your purview. However, once those projects come forward, whenever they work into the work plans of the various departments, then we will need to bring them forward for funding approval from the board.
Follow up.
So I have money from 2.0 sitting there that I cannot spend next year because the project planning has not happened yet. Would it be helpful for someone to be able to use that to get their projects done next year, if that could be replaced the following year?
Ms. Soldera?
From a cash flow perspective, absolutely. If we are positive that the project will not go forward in 2021, we generally don't allocate CWF 2.0 to 3.0 projects, just because those 2.0 projects could go forward at any time. So the cash should be available for those approved projects. But if that is the will of the committee, then we can put that forward for board resolution.
And would just suggest that if I recall correctly, UBCM is quite, here I'll use a good word, persnickety about blending and moving money around to various projects, because I do think they in effect audit at the end of each program to make sure that the allocations were put into the right criteria and met the right criteria. So it's a generous offer, but I'm suggesting that maybe the separation is a good one to keep. Ms. Soldera, does that ring true with you?
So there is we are required to report annually on what the funds were spent on. That report is audited. We need to make sure that the funds were spent on approved projects. What falls into the categories of approved projects does change periodically between gas tax programs. I believe 2.0 and 3.0, there hasn't been much change in the programs, but there was definitely a large change between 1.0 and further funding schemes.
I have Director Haim next.
Thank you. For me, the security of water and sewer are the most important things. And so from my standpoint, even though it's a small dollar item, the security of the Shellwood water system and moving forward on the well rehabilitation to me would be a priority. And I'd rather see that sooner rather than later, if at all possible, within that funding envelope for 2021.
Mr. Dennison, any comment on that? Shellwood?
Yeah, we've got a lot of issues, and it's often hard to choose. Now, your area director, Haim, I believe, has quite a bit of 1.0 and 2.0 unexpended funds as well. So if that's a thing that we can consider, that would be a way to, we could just shift that project over, or use the funding on the, the interim basis and then recover it later. I don't know, but that's a consideration anyway. Certainly it's important. I think, it's hard when you say, oh, Mr. Dennison, is your water project more important than a trails project? I'm going to say, yeah. But there's the community is a community judgment, right? So it's a difficult one, sure. But yes, it is important for sure.
Quick follow-up, Director Haim.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any 1.0 money carryover, but I believe there is some 2.0 that's been allocated that was originally allocated to the Shell Beach project, for example. So certainly if staff can look into whether or not there's something that could be reallocated, so similar to the timing aspects that Director Nicholson was talking about.
Sorry, just a clarification, Mr. Chairman. I believe that 1.0 is for Woodley Range.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm just trying to bring us to a logical conclusion. Oh, Director Smith.
Now that I'm on the right page, I apologize. I'm working on a couple of screens and it's not the best setup. One of the things I have a question for Mr. Dennison is that the 300,000, if we get the grant, we cannot use the Community Works Fund 3.0 to pay the additional portion, is because you're using two government funds. Is that correct?
You mean this is for the Carlton project?
No, for the Saltaire at the very top, the 300,000. So I'm a little questioning that, because I think that I remember that if you get a grant, you cannot use the Community Works Funds 3.0 funds to pay off the portion, the community portion, right?
Yep,
so if we get the grant, which we're all hoping for, we may not need to use the 300,000 towards the filtration. Can we switch that to a different project?
Absolutely.
And I also, the Thetis Island Wharf, I miscalculated and I needed that to be 66,000. Is that a possibility, Talitha, to bring it out of my parks allocation that I had and to even it out to be 66,000 and my portion that I put towards the parks be $4,000 less?
Ms. Saldera?
Within the gas tax listing, we can definitely change numbers around, and again, it will come down to what we have funding for in 2021.
So I'm looking to the staff report is asking for direction, and I'm assuming that Ms. Knodel-Joy has been taking. Okay, I guess we're not wrapping up yet. Can I go to Director Salmon and Acton? Director Salmon. You're muted, Director Salmon.
Sorry, there we go. I was suggesting a recommendation, if we're ready for that.
Well, I can you hold on to that recommendation for just a second, because it appears that we're not going to have the numbers that were presented in the report coming forward. There's been suggested changes. So what I was moving towards, if you can indulge me, is staff taking all of the notes and direction from today and bringing forward a finalized and accurate list. There's Louise, that will reflect the discussions from today for the recommendation go to the board. So I'm assuming that's enough direction for them. Do they need a special recommendation at this point? And I see Director Acton put up her hand. So go ahead, Director Acton.
Oops. Thank you. Is my mic? Yes, I'm good. Sorry, I have multiple screens here. I do have a motion, but I just wanted to talk about the flavor of the motion then. So, and see what the will of the committee is just for the phase 3 railway trail, and knowing that there's so many projects on the list, but my wish for this project and supporting Mill Bay would be to it essentially states that if there's any funding left in the CWF 3.0 for 2021, that it would be qualified for that funding, and any remainder would come from the 2022. Since there's more projects, there's more money than projects allocated for 2022.
Well, I of course defer to the committee, but I'm starting. Well, I've lost track of where we are in this, and I think a specific motion on a specific project might be counterproductive at this point. I'm strongly recommending that we put forward to staff the recommendations that have been made to this point, so that they can come forward with a refined and accurate list that would come forward to the board. And that gives us almost a month to do that. Now, I see Ms. Soldera probably going to say, no, that's a really bad idea, but that's what my suggestion would be, because there's been so many changes to the initial report that's been presented to us. So, Ms. Soldera, please wade in.
So absolutely, at the will of the committee, staff can either bring back another report with numbers for you to consider, or what has happened previously is that individual projects, so projects 1, 4, and 5 have been approved, and we can do it however the committee wishes, absolutely at the committee's direction. As for feedback, I apologize. There's been a number of discussions so far today, but the only suggestion that I've heard is that we potentially move Carlton into 2022, and so that is 160,000 worth. I've also heard that we should perhaps move Shell Beach up, and we should maybe add $4,000 to Thetis Island. And so this hasn't provided enough direction for staff to be able to come back with a list that meets the $1.3 million we have available.
Yeah, I think you buffered out on us and we didn't hear the last part of that. Is that accurate? Somebody's got a mic on with lots of noise in the background. Who is it? So here we are. I once again turn to the committee. I think that Ms. Soldera's suggested a few minor changes that I think changes a little bit of the face of the report. I'm not clear exactly what the dollar figures will be on each based on the changes that we've made. So what's your pleasure? Do you want to make individual motions on the items there, or could we trust staff to bring back a list and submit it to us before the next board meeting? What's your, Director Kuhn?
I think we should wait until the list gets back, because I've got an item that I have to discuss as well. I don't want to bring it up now, but yeah, I'm sure there'll be some minor corrections on this, and we'll deal with that when it comes back.
So is staff comfortable with the direction that you've been given so far? Ms. Soldera.
So you said that I buffered out, so I guess I'll repeat. I will apologize, but I don't know that we've received enough direction to make any changes. So the direction that I've heard, and please correct me if I've missed anything, but was that Carlton could potentially move to 2022. So that's 160,000. I also heard that Shellwood might want to move up in the priority list, so might want to join the number of projects to be approved for the year, and that Area G would like to add in another $4,000 to Thetis Island. And so that still gives us significantly more projects than funding for 2021. And other than the recommendations that staff's already made, I don't know where staff would go with that.
Director Salmon. Director Salmon.
Yeah, there we go. Well, in addition, I think, did you hear this? So Director Acton and I have agreed on the two big ones, that Honeymoon Bay Road would go and that anything left would go to Oregon Rail Trail. So if you can put that in the list to come back.
Director Acton.
Just for clarity, did Director Smith bring up the Saltaire $300,000 because of almost the same scenario as Carleton? So that would go into 2022 as well, because she wants to be able to receive that grant funding if that's available.
Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment on that, that's an earlier grant application, so we expect to be hearing. We've been told we will hear on the provincial side by mid to late fall 2020. So we're expecting to hear on that in the next, sort of month or two. So at least we'll know the provincial side, so we know whether we're in the game or not. So they're just very different timelines between the two grant programs.
So follow up, is there a way then for staff to balance this out? There seems to be a lot of floating balls in the air, and then we have Director Nicholson who's willing to share her funds. Maybe it's not always done, but it would be great if we could actually make, like during COVID, we should be employing as many people as we can, building things, repairing things. If we could get as many projects going in the communities as possible, that would be best. So if we could, Director Nicholson, anyway, am I getting my point across? Like, we have so much that's uncertain. Isn't there a way to ultimately make it efficient so that whenever one is available, they're in the list?
So I've got Director Nicholson and Director Smith.
Thank you. I just want to correct one word. I didn't say share. I said loan. But I do agree. I think it's important to get these projects going. We have so much trouble getting stuff done, it seems, especially on the roadside pathway issue. So I'm not sure how much I have from two that I'm sitting on for roadside pathways, but I wanted to take that and add whatever I have in 3.0 to do roadside pathways. So if it's helpful to use it next year, because I clearly am not going to get anything off the ground next year until the following year, hopefully, I think, please, that would be the best thing to do. Then at least more projects can start and hopefully get done.
So I'm just going back over the analysis, and it says here that we have a shortfall of 620. Where did Ms. Soldera go? There she is. We had a shortfall in the report, in the analysis, of $623,000. We've had some moving around and some withdrawal. I think I'm hearing Ms. Soldera's point is that in all of the discussion, we still haven't given them adequate direction to make the money balance with the project demand. Is that a fair assessment, Ms. Soldera?
If I may, we actually are getting there. So if it is the will of the committee, with this respect to the Saltaire project and perhaps the Carleton, but I will leave that up to engineering, we should leave them on the list for 2021 until we know for sure if we are going to get the grant funding or not, because the work does need to go ahead in 2021 if we're not going to get grant funding. And however, as soon as we are aware of whether that is a go or not, then should we not need the funding, it can then be reallocated to another project. So should the committee wish, we could approve all of the projects with the exception of, moving Carlton to 2022 as was discussed, and then allocating right now 84,936. So allocating the available funds to Area B's Shawnigan Railway Trail Phase 3. And should the project be able to proceed, my understanding is that they still need to do some detailed design on that project. And that would give more than sufficient funds to at least begin that. And should the project be able to proceed, by the time it's ready to go, we will know if we have a grant for Saltaire, and we will know what other funds we might have available, including the potential for temporarily borrowing 2.0 money from Electoral Area E. So that is a direction that we could take from the committee at this time.
What's the will of the committee? I think Director Acton just moved that, and Director Haim seconded it. And Director Salmon, do you have anything additional to say?
Sounds good.
Director Acton, do you have anything additional to say? Director Smith.
Yes, so yeah, I do.
Oh, sorry, Director Acton, go ahead.
So would that allow any projects that didn't get completed in 21 to have priority in 22 so that the funds would carry over?
Ms. Saltaire is nodding in agreement. Director Smith.
Yes, the Saltaire water system is mandated. We're under a water contravention order that's got a very tight timeline, and the 3.7 million is required as a loan, and we may have to move forward prior to the grant application being allocated. So the 300,000 is very, very important to remain there. I would love to share, but when you're mandated under a island health water order, you don't start doing something like that. And I was in a meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing yesterday with our CAO and our chair and our chair of EASC, and there is an indication that the grants won't be allocated till the spring of 2021. So we aren't sure where that's going, and that's because it goes to the federal government. We will have an indication from the provincial government, most likely sometime this fall, but the minister did indicate that the federal is the spring of 2021, unless under the speech on the 23rd, we all jump up and go, yippee, Saltaire's finally got its money. So yeah, the 300,000, I'm sorry, must stay on there for this time. Thank you.
Do we have any further discussion on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. So that was our 11. It's been about 75 minutes since we had a break. I don't think I could cheer myself out of a wet paper bag at this point until I get another cup of coffee. So I got to take a couple of minutes, folks. So let's reconvene at exactly 5 o'clock. Oh, Director, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to suggest a 15-minute break.
15 work for everyone? 5:05.
Blaze, where's Blaze?
Blaze.
Yeah, and going back to what you just said there, Ian, that was one of the reasons why I congratulated the delegation which came forward. They were bang, on point, brief, concise, clear, and it was done. It was great.
Wait.
Yep. Director, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now live again.
Thank you. We have most of us back, and we are on item R12, and I really want to congratulate any of you that are at home still watching our marathon regular meeting of Electoral Area Services, and would take this moment to remind you and please beg of you to be kind if you have any questions for the chair at the end of this meeting. that you could send those questions through to legislative services at all one word at cvrd.bc.ca. And if I'm not mistaken, we're on item R12. And R12 looks to me like to be a list that was forwarded to us before. We talked about it, chewed on it a bit, sent it back to staff, said squeeze some more stuff in, cut from here, borrow from there, and come up with a new list. And I believe that's the list that we have before us today. So I was going to go to Ms. Soldera to introduce it. I think we got movers and seconders and shakers and yes. Do Ms. Soldera a brief introduction, please?
Absolutely. You introduced it very eloquently yourself. So 2 weeks ago, we discussed the list. Staff were asked to put one project back on the list. Staff made a few amendments in order to accommodate this. And before you was the revised list. Just a reminder for the board that, or sorry, for the committee, that this is the list of asset management infrastructure projects. So using the 30% of the gas tax funds over the next 5 years. And while there are some proposed dates with respect to these projects, as we just learned in the previous item, those dates do move around from time to time to accommodate available funding.
Thank you. Director Yanni Donardo. Moving the recommended list, seconded by Director Smith. Oh my gosh, any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Hallelujah. Good job. R13. Everybody buckled in, ready for this one? Actually, this should be fairly straightforward. Oh, look at Mr. Dennison even popped back into the screen there for a minute. R13, I believe we'll be calling on Ms. Breen to join us.
Good afternoon.
Is it still afternoon? It's still light out, I guess. Ms. Breen.
Thank you. Before you this afternoon is the draft harmonized official community plan for the electoral areas, including bylaw 4270, including several schedules, the DPAs, the local plans, and all of the new map schedules, a draft bylaw 4329, which is a bylaw revision bylaw, which proposes to permit movement of some of the DPA guidelines into the zoning bylaw, bylaw 4330, which is proposing to add and delete certain items from the zoning bylaws to make them consistent with the draft 4270, and a draft amenity policy because we, upon advice, removed all of the amenity policies from the various different OCPs to include it in this draft policy. The idea behind providing this today prior to October 7th, when we, staff is proposing to come back with the three bylaws and for first reading and the amenity policy, was to provide you as directors the opportunity and the public to see the composite of recent changes which reflect internal referrals to all departments and as a result of the previous consultations with the ABCs and the open houses. So that's what's before you today. And also Rob Grant is online with me today if there's any questions regarding maps.
Thank you, Ms. Breen. I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit here and judging from the looks, I'll get to you immediately after Director Wilson. This has been a pretty long day and we've used a lot of brain power today and in reading through this, it's quite a daunting body of work and I'm not quite comfortable with the fact that we'd be 3 weeks from now introducing these bylaws to committee. I'm just not, I don't have a comfort level, a familiarization level that would give me comfort, even if I started reading today and started rereading again today and going through this. So I would ask if there's any desire amongst committee members, because this is groundbreaking stuff as going to this format. If there's any desire amongst committee members to perhaps have a half-day workshop with staff to put this all together in a digestible format for us to see lots of nodding around the table. I don't know if that could be pulled off before the 7th of October, but I throw that out there for your consideration, and I'll go to Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Coralie and her colleagues have done a huge amount of work on here. This is not a question. This is more or less seeking clarification on a point which has come up. As I say, Coralie and her staff, her colleagues have done a brilliant job on working through this. One of the things that I am very concerned about is that Coralie and maybe somebody else has been diverted for work on the housing needs assessment, and I'm just wondering how that has or will impact the going forward as she and her staff work on this. I would hope that there is very little impact, but I'm sure that's not the case. I wonder if and I'm not going to put Coralie on the spot here. It's just that I'm not very happy about people being diverted away from this particular bit of hard work.
So Coralie, I think that's appropriate that Director Wilson has not put you on the hot seat, and I don't know whether Ms. Charelf, who's the general manager of the department, would have any additional comment, but fair enough said, and Ms. Charelf has activated her monitor, so do you have any comment in regards to what Director Wilson's just shared?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think absolutely a fair comment. The project, the HOCP MOC project, is a massive project, as you can see, and requires significant resources. We're fortunate that Ms. Breen is an excellent project manager and has been doing a great job of managing the consultants who are doing most of the legwork around the housing project, and working in partnership with municipalities on that project. Just for your information, we are in the process of increasing the staffing within community planning. So you are going to see some changes coming forward within the next couple of months. So I can't say any more than that now, because it's staffing related, but be positive. Things are happening.
Well, stay on the line with us, Ms. Charelf. When I raised the idea of a half-day or two-third-day workshop for familiarization and a little bit of a deeper dive, there seemed to be quite a few people nodding in agreement that would be a good idea. I would couple that with my concern that perhaps October 7th, which is about 3 weeks away, it might fit in the calendar, but we've got an awful lot of stuff going on there. So do you have any suggestions as to whether or not we could pull off a workshop for directors to have a bit of a deeper dive and a better rounded view of the project before we bring bylaws to committee?
Absolutely. I think that I'm maybe putting Coralie on the spot a little bit, but I think that would probably make sense. It would be nice to have that time to have a better explanation of the various components of the bylaws, because it's a little bit more complex than your typical OCP and zoning bylaw, right? You have a fifth Wednesday, I believe, this month. No, you do not. When it's just the electoral directors, we're not looking at the full board necessarily. It's probably a bit easier than full board in terms of scheduling a special meeting. I think that's probably what we would be looking at, because this is information coming forward for consideration of bylaw readings. So I think to be on good solid ground, you would want to do that as a special meeting.
Okay, thank you. Director Kuhn.
Yes, I also feel that the date set for October to have this done is too short. I think it should be pushed into November. And I don't think there's any real reason to put such a short deadline on it. This is a pretty big project, not only for Coralie, who's mainly been involved in some of the planners, but it's a big project for us too. And we've got a fair amount of stuff coming up now anyway. So I would like to see this pushed off into November, and in the meantime have a separate session dealing with it.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask, just going through the reports and particularly for Area B, I saw some inaccuracies. So I don't want to actually go and change full wording or anything, but if there's just some minor inaccuracies to correct, how should we deal with those?
Ms. Breen.
Yeah, through the chair. We've already been contacted by some directors regarding either comments or questions or maybe requests for changes, clarifications. So please contact me directly. That is one of the points of providing all of this now in the public realm, is we hope that people will read everything, have that final kind of look through and contact us accordingly. So we do expect that, and we thank you for taking the time to do that.
So just before I go to Director Smith, would the committee feel comfortable with myself and Ms. Breen and Ms. Trelf sitting down and looking at our calendars to see how we could coordinate a workshop, and then coming back with the bylaws at a date fairly soon? I see some nodding, and I don't know if you need a resolution to that effect, but I'd be more than willing to do that. I'm sure we could get that done in fairly short order. Director Smith, you had a comment?
Yes, will these be going to our APCs to also have a look at? They've been heavily involved in the process. We've relied on them greatly over a year and a half, and they've stepped forward as volunteers. And maybe there's something that we should be making sure that these are also allocated for them to be looking at.
It's a fair suggestion. I would recommend at this point that they are part of the public domain now, as they have been published. And I do know that the APCs, some more than others, were fairly heavily involved in the process. I don't know whether it's the desire of the committee to send it back and add another layer of discussion in this. I think staff brought forward bylaws to our attention because they're ready to move forward. So I guess that's something else to consider. Maybe we can have that discussion when we have a workshop. So any other, I see some more nodding around the table around that. So is there any need for any further discussion or direction or input to staff? Okay, thank you for that latitude to make those arrangements. I think that's an excellent step forward. And that takes us now through to no unfinished business, no new business. Ms. Harrison, what do we have in the way of questions for the chair today?
We have 2 submissions. Let me just start the clock here. Okay, so the first submission is by Bernard Yearlink.
Could you speak into your microphone a little louder, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The first submission is from Bernard Yearlink, and it reads, Dear Chair, R4, I find it passing strange that the public hearing scheduled for bylaw 4326 have directors Morrison and Kuhn as delegates, in addition to Director Wilson. This is an issue that affects South Cowichan. I'm wondering why Directors Acton and Salmon are not delegates, in addition to Director Wilson.
The staff have a policy of the how directors are delegated to the public hearings, and given the COVID circumstances and the new technology that is being implemented, I can attest that I've been taking some additional training with staff to be able to facilitate the role of chair of these meetings. And I think that there's a chance for us to broaden the scope of directors who are delegated. But at this point, this is the regime that we're following, and it has been a practice of the regional district for quite some time that we have a director where the application is held, a neighboring director, and a director that's maybe a little further flung that brings a different set of eyes to a hearing. But the upstart of that and the main point is every director is provided with a accurate public hearing record, and we are all making the decisions ultimately on the basis of the same information that's been recorded at the public hearing. So we all have the same access to the same information when we come to making decisions after the public hearing. Next question, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next submission is from Cliff Evans, and it reads, Mr. Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. On this afternoon's agenda, item R4, report from the Development Services Division re-application RZ20C01 for 1134 Chapman Road. I noticed that Directors Morrison, Kuhn, and Wilson will be presiding over the hearing. The development is proposed to take place in Area C, Cobble Hill. The public would like to see the 3 directors from Shawnigan, Cobble Hill, and Mill Bay preside over the meetings for local input. Chair Morrison could perhaps attend as a coach if deemed necessary.
Well, I thank him very much for his input. We do have a policy on how directors are delegated, and I'll repeat that all of us will be making the decision based on the same information. And from my understanding of the program that we will be using, that other directors, should they wish to observe, are equally able to observe. And I would like to correct the idea of the notion that any delegated director at a public hearing is presiding over anything. A public hearing is first and foremost directors there to hear from the public. And in the case of the challenges we have around COVID and the unique way that we have to conduct our public hearings, I will ensure, and I'm sure Director Wilson and Director Kuhn, as the delegated directors, will ensure that an accurate representation of the comments that we hear and the written submissions and the like are all accurately provided to our colleagues so that we're all making decisions based on the same information. So I thank him for his question, but we certainly don't preside, and we're there to hear the public, and that's the main purpose of a public hearing. Any further submissions for questions to me, Ms. Harrison?
There are none.
Thank you very much for that. I'm hoping and praying, and I don't think I read anything about a closed session, so we have no closed items, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have none.
So everybody knows what's next. Motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you for your patience, everyone. It's been a very long and trying day. Thank you very much.
Well done, Ian. Well done.
Well done.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.